The June 13, 2019 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Bertram, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin.
Present.
Ms. Ramsey.
Here.
Mayor Freiling.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pons.
Here.
Mr. Zhang.
Here.
Before us, we have the minutes from the April 8, April 11, and May 6, 2019 meetings. Are there any additions or corrections to these minutes?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Ms. Bertram?
Mr. Maslin.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
This takes us to matters of special privilege. We have one listed on the agenda, but we will actually have three today. We'll do the Business Appreciation Award second, but before that, I just have a few words to say. May 31, 2019 started out like any other late spring weekend eve. Folks went to work, made plans for the weekend, and possibly considered how they might enjoy their summer vacation. But it ended in a way that no one saw coming. 13 days ago, in Municipal Building 2 in Virginia Beach, the horrific reality of mass murder plunged into that community, and by extension, all of Hampton Roads. Despite the heroic and immediate action by first responders, 11 of their own colleagues and one of their customers lay dead. Of course, we are devastated by this tragically senseless act of violence. So many families' worlds are forever changed within a matter of minutes. So many loved ones lost, so many dreams shattered, so many lives torn asunder. For what purpose? Where does it all stop? We have seen mass shootings in schools, in places of worship, in movie theaters, in restaurants, in office buildings, in nightclubs, at newspapers, at concerts, and now at a municipal building. As much as we want to make all of these places secure, we must also deal with the underlying societal issues that are driving this behavior. We will do what we can on the local level, and I feel confident that this latest tragedy will help move things forward at the state level to some degree, but we desperately need leadership here on the national stage. We need to address mental health issues, access to automatic weapons and large capacity magazines, and the pervasive culture of hate that has now been allowed to fester openly to the point that it is celebrated by some. Don't be afraid to shed tears. We absolutely cannot afford to become numb to these hideous acts. We must acknowledge the pain and allow the anguish to motivate us to do better. In the meantime, make sure you hug your loved ones. And when you do, think about the victims and their families who will never again be able to experience that joy, that comfort, that purpose-giving moment. Think about Lakita C. Brown, Tara Welch Gallagher, Mary Louise Gale, Alexander Mikhail Gusev, Catherine A. Nixon, Richard H. Nettleton, Christopher Kelly Rapp, Brian Keith Cox, Joshua O. Hardy, Michelle Missy Langer, Robert Bobby Williams, Herbert Burt Snelling, and all of their families, and the many others whose lives were forever altered that day. Now, if we may observe a moment of silence for the victims, please. Thank you. My apologies for beginning on that somber note. We'll now move on to our next matter of special privilege, which is our Business Appreciation Award, and I'd like to ask my fellow members of council to join me down here at the podium, along with Mr. George Cunha. I really prefer to stand on the steps because that's usually how I can be seen. But today we're here to recognize Cardinal Survey and Design. This is the first professional services company in Williamsburg to win this award. Located at 156 Strawberry Plains Road, George Cunha started this business 9 years ago, and in that time has now grown to 18 employees. You've probably seen their white vans with the Cardinal logo on them around town. Mr. Cunha is involved in every aspect of the firm's surveying projects, from planning and scheduling to customer service and quality control. They solve problems for their clients, provide extra attention to detail, affordable pricing, personalized services, and fast turnaround times. Who wouldn't love all of that? They're flexible and think outside the box to solve client issues. Cardinal Survey and Design is also in growth mode, currently acquiring a company located in Richmond, who shall remain nameless for the moment, and have already acquired Berkeley Howell, which provides additional services for the company in the Lynchburg market. Mr. Cunha, on behalf of the Economic Development Authority, who helped determine the winner of this award, from all of city staff and my colleagues on city council, congratulations to you and the Cardinal team. Thank you.
Wow. It's pretty exciting. I wish my staff could be here right now too, but it's all about them. They really work hard. For the past 9 years, I started out in my, in my office at home with my, Saturn wagon with my robotic instrument we just bought a company in Richmond now, so we're up to 40 employees. So it's really exciting. The whole point of, me going into the city, I'll tell you, it's just a quick story and I'll keep it short. The Commissioner of Revenue at the time, was the only person that actually sat down with me and actually took me into her, basically into her office and spent a half hour talking to me of what my business plan was and how the city is going to help me out. So right there and then I said, I'm staying in the city. I live in Stonehouse up in James City County, and I didn't battle out. I came to the city. So, and we're going to stay here. So anyway, thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
The tedious part. She takes pictures ad nauseum. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, no problem.
Now it's time to move.
No, we're staying.
Well, that was unfortunate that all of our first responders had to leave, because our next item, or matter of special privilege, it's a bittersweet one for all of us. It's time to recognize Chief Pat Dent on his service to the city of Williamsburg. He loves this kind of stuff. I have a resolution to read, Chief. Resolution of commendation and appreciation, Fire Chief Pat Dent, on the occasion of his retirement. Whereas, after a long and distinguished 38-year career with the fire service, Pat Dent will retire July 1, 2019, having effectively and honorably served the city of Williamsburg for over 10 years. And whereas, Chief Dent served as the 5th fire chief in the history of the Williamsburg Fire Department. And whereas, Chief Dent admirably led the city as the emergency management coordinator in response to several incidents, including Hurricane Irene in 2011, water rescue at Waller Mill Park in 2014, and the fire station fire in 2017. On top of all of that, the helicopter crash at Bristol Commons in 2018. And whereas Chief Dent implemented the first professional development policy to improve personnel progress and to ensure adequate succession planning. And whereas Chief Dent created and employed several operational procedures that increased the readiness and efficiency of the Williamsburg Fire Department. And whereas Chief Dent has served on various boards and associations, including as a past president of the Virginia Fire Chiefs Association and the Peninsula EMS Council. And whereas during Chief Dent's tenure, he developed and strengthened many professional and personal relationships, earning him the utmost respect of colleagues and citizens alike. And whereas Chief Dent's successes and achievements will continue beyond his retirement, affirming his legacy as a visionary leader and ambassador of the Williamsburg Fire Department and the City of Williamsburg. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Williamsburg, on behalf of all of the citizens of Williamsburg, does hereby express its sincere gratitude for Chief Pat Dent's years of leadership and service. We congratulate him upon his retirement and wish him many years of happiness. And it is signed by all 5 members of the Williamsburg City Council. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Freiling, members of City Council, Mr. Trivette. Over the last couple of days, it's really realities begin to set in that I'm stepping away from the only thing I've ever known for a career, and it's getting a little difficult. But, you know, looking back over my career, there's nothing that could top the day that I was offered the position to come to Williamsburg as the deputy fire chief, and then succeeded Chief Weiler as the fire chief in Williamsburg. There's not the highlight of my career, not just that I was a fire chief, but I came to the city of Williamsburg. Well respected, the community, the whole team here, it's just been overwhelming. The support that I've had throughout my career, none of these accomplishments would have been possible without support of City Council, the city manager, and the community. It's just been overwhelming what we've been able to accomplish. Two things I have to say before I sit down is the people that deserve all the credit just left the room. They're the ones that do the job day in and day out to make this a safer community. And also my wife. We celebrated our 37th anniversary last week, so she's been with me all along the way. The times that I was at work and she was at home taking care of the family, and she still continues to do that. Today she's at home working in her new job, so I guess somebody in the family's got to continue to earn a paycheck. So thank you all again, and the only thing I can say in ending, it's just been an honor to serve the city of Williamsburg, and I appreciate all the support. Thank you.
Well, that takes us to our public hearing section of today's meeting, of which we have one. The first is PCR 19-010, Request of BAJRANG LLC to rezone .885 acres at 216 Parkway Drive, the Econo Lodge property, from Corridor Business District B2 to Planned Development Housing District PDH for the conversion of the hotel into apartments. Ms. Murphy?
Ms. Murphy, before you begin, Mr. Mayor, as the owner of the only other PDH zone property in Williamsburg in my association with the management company, I'll be recusing myself from the discussion and the vote. I'll take a seat in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Pons.
Mayor Frowling and members of council, the owners of the Econo Lodge Motel are proposing to rezone .885 acres at 216 Parkway Drive from B2 Corridor Business District to PDH Planned Development Housing District in order to convert 48 existing motel rooms into 42 adaptive housing units. In your packet, I included the applicant's statement, management plan, and schematic plans. This is a section from the comp plan which indicates land to the south, the Parkway Building, the Colonial Equipment and Supply, Cypher's Heating and Plumbing, and to the east, Auto House, and to the west, 2nd Street Restaurant are designated as corridor commercial land use. The land to the north, Parkway Towns at Williamsburg, is designated high-density multifamily residential. This slide indicates the existing zoning surrounding the property. The property, along with the properties to the south, east, and west, are zoned corridor business district, with the land to the north zone multifamily dwelling district, RM2 conditional. The property at 216 Parkway Drive is proposed to be rezoned to PDH. The intent of the PDH district reads, this district is established to encourage adaptive housing by allowing conversion of a limited number of existing hotel-motel rooms located in the B2 zoning district into affordable housing for individuals and families, and thereby fulfilling a housing need not addressed by the city's existing housing inventory. The PDH district should be located so as to take advantage of the proximity to existing transit routes, pedestrian and bicycles, and should not be located on sites that have significant redevelopment potential. The PDH district allows adaptive housing, which is defined as primarily efficiency in one-bedroom units with adequate cooking facilities created for all or part of the existing hotel or motel, and which is used for the purpose of providing non-permanent, affordable, and flexible term housing for individuals and families who may not have access to traditional housing alternatives in the city, but who are not visitors as defined in the zoning ordinance. The PDH district allows no more than 150 adaptive housing units in the city and no more than 100 on one individual facility. As I mentioned previously, this proposal is to convert 48 hotel units into 42 adaptive housing units, a leasing office, a lounge, laundry, exercise room, and pool. The 42 units will consist of 34 efficiencies and 8 one-bedroom units, which will result in a density of 47.5 dwelling units per net acre. The applicant proposes rents in the range of $695 to $995 per month, depending on the size and layout of the unit and the number of individuals occupying the unit. Flexible lease terms and deposits are proposed, with trash and water being included in the monthly rent. Individual electrical meters and heating and cooling units are proposed for each apartment. Each apartment will also be wired for internet and phone service should the tenant choose to contract with a provider for those services. The applicant also proposes to install a new fire suppression system and on-site closed-circuit security camera system for the complex. The site currently contains 50 parking spaces and 42 spaces are required for the project. The applicant proposes 42 parking spaces, with the current parking spaces in front of the hotel and pool area being removed and replaced with landscaping as shown on the conceptual site plan, which is up on the screen. The landscape open space required for the site is 20%, and the applicant will provide 21%. I will briefly go over a little bit of the history of the adaptive housing in the city. In 2015, City Council adopted a PDH district to allow adaptive housing, which is defined as primarily efficiency in one-bedroom units with adequate cooking facilities created for all or part of an existing hotel, motel and used for the purpose of providing non-permanent, affordable, and flexible term housing. The 2015 ordinance allowed no more than 100 units in the city with no more than 50 in one individual facility. The Flats at Williamsburg submitted a request to convert 60 of their existing 128 units into 47 adaptive housing units, resulting in a density of 16.3 units. That proposal was approved in May of 2015. In May of 2017, the text was changed to allow up to 150 adaptive housing units in the city with no more than 100 in one individual facility. The Flats at Williamsburg submitted a request to have a total of 100 units on the property with a density of 35 dwelling units per net acre and was approved in May 2017. So based on those approvals, there are 50 units available in the city for adaptive housing. The PDH district lists a number of review criteria for evaluation of a proposed PDH project. The location of the hotel or motel, and I would note that this project is located on Parkway Drive, one lot from the intersection of 2nd Street and Parkway Drive. Parkway Drive has a mixture of residential and commercial uses with Parkway Townhomes and Wyndham Plantation to the east and Parkway warehouses with commercial uses fronting on 2nd Street. The potential of the site for significant redevelopment. The site has low potential for significant redevelopment at the present time. The lot size is such that it limits its potential for redevelopment because of the amount of parking and landscape required for redevelopment. The history of the property, maintenance and fire code violations for the site. There have been no property maintenance complaints or fire code violations for the property in the last 5 years. The proximity of the site to existing transit routes. Staff would note no bus service exists on Parkway Drive or 2nd Street. There are 2 water routes located, one on Merrimack Trail route, which is accessible from Capitol Landing Road and Merrimack Trail, and the Lee Hall route, which is accessible from York Street. The proximity of the site to pedestrian and bicycle facilities. This site abuts sidewalks on Parkway Drive and sidewalks and new bike lanes on 2nd Street. The inclusion of housing is suitable for seniors and for persons with disabilities when it is appropriate as part of the adaptive housing facility. There are 20 ground floor units with 1 unit required to be improved as an accessible unit to meet ADA requirements. These ground floor units will provide opportunities for housing seniors and persons with disabilities. The suitability of the proposed management plan. This project will be subject to the management plan for the upkeep and maintenance of Parkway Landing at Williamsburg. The project will be professionally managed by an accredited apartment and management company. An on-site manager will staff the premises on a part-time basis as outlined in the management plan. The on-site manager will respond to resident complaints, coordinate move-in and move-outs, maintain the complex to make sure any maintenance or upkeep issues are properly addressed on the property. The project will contain an area where information on important community events and services may be posted, included but not limited to Hands Together Historic Triangle event held each year, information about local free and low-cost clinics like Old Town Medical and Dental Center and the Lackey Free Clinic. An internet cafe, communal computer, and internet connection will have a link to the city's human services page for residents to use as an online access point to location services. Additional details were provided in the management plan. An on-site closed security camera system is proposed to provide surveillance of the complex and parking areas. The entire complex will be renovated and sprinkler systems will be installed with other amenities outlined in the management plan. The compatibility of the adaptive housing facility with existing residential and commercial development in the vicinity of the proposed location. This property is located on Parkway Drive, which is a side street from 2nd Street. The property is adjacent to the Parkway building, Colonial Equipment, and Cyphers Plumbing. Along the left side with 2nd Street Bistro along the rear, which are zoned Corridor Commercial Business District. An undedicated right-of-way is located to the right of the property, and to the right of the right-of-way on Parkway Drive is Parkway Townhomes, which contains 30 townhouses. The scale and intensity of the proposed 42 housing units are compatible with existing residential and commercial development in the vicinity. There is a demand for affordable housing units in the city. The rezoning request will provide a housing product that will help to address the needs, since the project will open with rents ranging from $6.95 to $9.95 a month, including water and trash service based on the size and number of individuals occupying a unit. The applicant proposes flexible lease terms and small deposits ranging from $300 to $600, depending on each tenant's individual circumstances. The applicant states, "This apartment complex has been designed for and will be marketed to the greater Williamsburg workforce, both permanent and temporary, as well as to students and seniors. This project takes advantage of the city's PDH district by converting 48 underutilized hotel rooms into 42 affordable housing units, which helps to fulfill housing needs in the city. This project also makes the basic criteria of the PDH district for this type of housing." Planning Commission held a public hearing on May the 15th. The applicant's attorney and 12 citizens spoke at the hearing. Planning Commission recommended to City Council by a vote of 5-0 to approve the request as outlined in proposed ordinance 19-11. Since the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant has revised their management plan for the development to address parking concerns raised during the public hearing. The applicant proposes to administer a parking program to maximize on-site and minimize the impact of any off-street parking generated by the project. The parking program proposes that each apartment unit be assigned one parking space, which will contain a parking permit to be placed on the occupant's vehicle. If a resident does not have a car, the space allocated for that unit will become a provisional parking space, which may be revoked if that unit is not occupied with a resident that needs the parking space. They note the lease terms will address on-site parking and the limitation of one car per unit, absent other arrangements with management. Therefore, the recommendation is to approve proposed ordinance 19-11 to rezone .885 acres at 216 Parkway Drive from Corridor Business District B2 to Planned Development Housing, PDH. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. I'll come back to my colleagues on council for questions before we open the public hearing. Mr. Zhang?
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, for your informative overview of the project. I know the applicant is here and council is here today, so I'll probably ask more specific questions with some of the concerns, but I do think the concerns that we've heard from residents, I think they are worthy of asking further and probing further. So let me ask first, in terms of parking, you had mentioned in your memo, excellently outlined that council and the applicant have proposed a new revised parking management plan. So can you kind of discuss how does city staff evaluate parking concerns? I know sometimes your staff and you may direct parking analysis, which I know some residents have said, why haven't we done parking analysis? Can you speak a little bit to when those are necessary? When do you determine whether it's worth,
The parking is requirement for the units are based in the zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance requires one parking space for each unit. So that's where the 42 parking spaces came up.
Okay. In terms of the management plan, I mean, was there further discussion?
The management plan is part of the requirement, and the applicant, after being at the Planning Commission meeting, revised the management plan to address the parking as I outlined in my presentation by limiting one parking space per unit.
Right. In terms of the rezoning aspect from B, it's currently zoned B2, right?
That's correct.
And generally, we've always had this idea that because of the limited amount of land that we have. Those that are already considered or zoned for commercial are generally considered very valuable pieces of parcels, and obviously notwithstanding any more analysis that we continue to deliberate today, how have you or Planning Commission deliberated that this was the best and highest use of this
Well, I
parcel
think if you
land?
look at the business zone properties, this lot is one lot, as I mentioned in my staff report, off of Second Street, so it does not have direct access to a major corridor. So that's how staff looked at this property and thinks, and I think Planning Commission also agreed that this was one of the hotel buildings that was acceptable to be changed to adaptive housing. And you have to remember that those hotel buildings are limited to those in the B2 district. And the B2 district is basically York Street, Page Street, Second Street, and the upper end of Richmond Road from Bypass Road to the city lines. So those are the properties that are available in the B2 district. So it's those hotels in those districts.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of discussing with the PDH policy, I know we have a 100-unit limit, and this will be 150.
150
Sorry,
units, 101
Okay,
hotel.
but with this proposal, it's going to hit that.
This proposal will have us at 142 units
Okay.
out of the 150.
So then it'll be 8-1. So
Right.
in terms of, have there been any other applicants, thank you, by the way, have there been any other applicants in other corridor commercial districts that have tried to apply for this rezoning?
No, sir.
Okay,
This is the second one.
okay. I might have more questions, but I'll just leave it with that.
Sure. And we also have the public hearing to enjoy, too.
Right.
Mr. Zhang covered a couple things that I had on my list. I know that parking was a big issue, so I'm glad that that has been revised. I know there's been particular concern of on-street parking there on Parkway Drive, and I assume that since that's a public street, it's available for whoever is there, whether they're going to have someone visiting at Parkway Towns or Second Street Bistro or an employee working there. So that's open
Currently, that's
legally to everyone.
Public parking.
Everyone. And because there had been mention that a couple establishments in the area had suggested that patrons park on Parkway a little further removed, but I hadn't seen anything specifically suggesting people park there. One was mentioned Virginia Beer Company, but I hadn't seen anything for that. So I'm glad about the parking. And I was also glad that it was confirmed again in your memo that the property has not been cited for any trash, litter, noise, any problems like that in the past 5 years.
That's correct.
And also, a lot of us I don't remember or really pay attention to when the Econo Lodge was built, but at the time that it was built and other properties on Capitol Landing Road, that was a very robust area for hotels, I would assume. And so as things have changed, as you said, there's not really a lot of opportunity for other development in that area.
I think the applicant provided the report on their occupancy rates, which clearly shows that they're in the 20s for occupancy rate. And that hotel was built in 1974 is what our records indicate.
I know that others in timeshares have also made a big impact on the traffic there. And another thing that came up at the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to address here, was about the traffic. And as far as a traffic study being done, and I think that you had some information on that as well.
Before we did the road dot, we looked at seeing a
Ms.
traffic
Murphy,
light.
could you explain for the audience what the road
The
diet?
road dot, a road dot is when we took Second Street from 2 lanes each direction into 1 lane each direction with a center turn lane and bicycle facilities on both sides. Before that, we had a project called Blue Green, which was over on Penniman Road. And that was going to contain 400 units and 840 beds. So we looked at that as part of that development, that would trigger a traffic light at Parkway and Second Street. Without that, we haven't seen any need. I don't think Dan Clayton, the Public Works Director, we did the road dot because Second Street has, I think, 13,000 vehicles per day, so that was one of the reasons we were allowed to do the road dot, and we didn't see the need for a traffic light. It didn't meet the warrants at this time.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Maslin?
Sure. So just to clarify, unlike the previous rezoning public hearing, there's no need to change the comp plan for this one, correct?
That's correct.
And then in terms of, the hotel was built in 1974. A lot of the residences around that were built afterwards. Is that correct?
That's correct. You have Parkway Towns, which was built, completed basically in 2017, 2018. We had Wyndham East, which was under construction in 1997. Other than that, I think that's the main development, other than a couple of units on top of the commercial building on 2nd Street.
Okay. In terms of the parking analysis, so I think you said you were just accepting what the code requires, the zoning code. Would it be an option of City Council to determine that that was not adequate in this particular case and require additional parking?
I think we also talked to an engineer, and the engineer informed staff that for the hotel units require more parking, more trips per day than a apartment complex. So that was part of the reason that we didn't request a traffic study for the project either. But if you want to require more parking, I think I have to tell you that this is a rezoning request, and we cannot put conditions on a rezoning request. That what you have before you is what the applicant has submitted, and we have to basically vote it up or down. And let Chris explain that further.
Ms. Shelton, could you chime in on this, please?
Yes, so the applicant gets to take advantage of what the existing zoning says. There's no proffer submitted here with respect to the parking, so in respect to the parking, it meets the existing code provisions.
Just a question on the engineer's comments. It seems to me that if you've got an apartment with 2 people in it that are each going to have a car, if you've got a hotel room with a family coming, they're probably going to have 1 car. Did he or she look at that aspect?
Well, I think they look at the trip generation manual, and that's based on the VDOT standards, I would think. Is that right, Dan? So that's how they determine the amount of trips per day. And the amount of trips per day for a hotel is slightly more than the amount of trips per day for an apartment complex of this size.
Oh, in terms of the management plan, so the way I understand the ordinance, it's up to the City Council to approve or not approve the management plan as part of this. Is that correct?
Well, it's up to City Council to approve or not approve the
whole thing.
rezoning request, okay, which is part of the management plan.
So, and I think some of the details we would be asking the applicant later on to explain. But did I see something about recycling, that they weren't sure whether they were going to do recycling or not? I didn't understand that.
The Site Plan Review Committee had a question on recycling, and they went back and on the park on trash, and they went back and they're trying to look at how they can provide recycling on the site in a way that meets our requirements. So they might be doing bins and smaller bins and those things rather than have a bigger large facility, because they don't have the room on the property to put a large recycling container like they did for the dumpster.
So we could actually see that as a requirement, that there actually be recycling, not an option?
Do we require recycling anywhere in the city?
No.
So, but in the management plan, would that be logically something that would be addressed in the management plan for an apartment complex?
I think we...
Ms. Shelton, please.
The management plan needs to be sufficient for City Council. You need to feel comfortable that the property is going to be properly managed. It's a subjective decision on your part whether the management plan meets those requirements.
Okay, and in terms of the density, so the density that city or the planning commission and the planning department is accepting was the 42 units per 0.885 acres, correct?
47.5.
Per acre, 47.5 per acre.
That's the density for this property, based on the number of units into the lot size.
And the previous benchmark we have is that, you know, the flats, that was a density of 35
That's
per acre.
correct.
So what's the analysis to say that 35 works and 47 works?
Well, I think you look at the ordinance requirements and see if the applicant can meet the basic ordinance requirements, and then it's a decision of Planning Commission's recommendation to council, and then council's decision on whether they think the project and the management plan is appropriate for a rezoning, to approve the rezoning request. Staff thought it was okay, Planning Commission thought it was okay, but it's something that City Council gets to look at in your decision.
Okay. I think I have a few questions, but that'd be for the applicant about the management plan.
Okay. Ms. Murphy, if I can just, Mr. Maslin touched on density. So help me understand this, the PDH is only intended currently, the way it's, the zoning is laid out, to apply to properties that are currently in a B2 zoning district.
That's correct.
Correct.
Hotels and motels.
That's my only question for right now, but please stick around. I have a feeling we're going to need your help. With that, we'll open the public hearing. We'll start with the applicant, and I have a series of speakers cards. After we go through the speakers cards, we'll open the floor to anybody who would like to address council on this matter. I would ask that each speaker provide your name and address. Direct your comments, please, to the council. And if you could keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, we'd appreciate that.
Good afternoon, Council. Scott Foster, Counsel for the applicant. Mr. Patel and I are very excited about the rezoning application before you today. Ms. Murphy's presentation was thorough, covered the intent of the PDH district and the details of this project. I'd like to take this opportunity to address some of the concerns raised to both Planning Commission and City Council about this application. I hope these points provide relief to the concerned parties and demonstrate Mr. Patel's intent to make this project a success for all parties involved. First, I want to emphasize what this project is. This is workforce housing, provided at the most affordable end of the market rate and brought to market by the private sector. This is not subsidized housing, HUD housing, Section 8, or some other form of housing supported by tax dollars. With rents from $750 to $1,050 per month, inclusive of utilities, a single person making as little as $16 per hour, working 40 hours a week, can live alone in an efficiency in this complex without spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Threshold set by the federal government for determining if someone is cost burdened by their housing expense. The same is true for a single earner making $22 per hour, living in the largest one-bedroom apartment. With these single occupancy figures, it's easy to see how two individuals who occupy a unit can make as little as $8 to $11 per hour and still afford these units without being cost burdened. It's important for council and the public to understand who we're talking about when we're talking about wage earners in this range. At Colonial Williamsburg, a frontline interpreter starting hourly wage is $11 per hour. An entry-level chef, $10.39. A coach driver apprentice, $14.62. At William & Mary, a lab technician at the Student Health Center, up to $20 per hour. A communications associate at the Reeves Center, up to $15 per hour. An archaeological field technician, $13 to $15 an hour. A custodial worker, $12 an hour. Or put in the terms of a salaried position, the men's assistant tennis coach makes up to $40,000 per year, or just under $20 per hour, working 40 hours a week. At the City of Williamsburg, the assistant city registrar makes $34,000, or at $40 a week, $16.35 per hour. Entry-level firefighter medic, $40,000, or roughly $19.25 an hour. and a water sewer maintenance worker, $28,000, or roughly $13.70 an hour. It's easy to see that these are the people who make Williamsburg as we know it possible. People in these positions are typically successful applicants for this type of apartment, regularly meet the credit, income, and background checks. As with any apartment complex, we welcome the applications of students, seniors, people looking for short-term housing between buying and selling a home or having a home completed. But understand that this project is designed and priced to meet the need for workforce housing as identified by the city. Second is the issue of density. The worst-case scenario that's been tossed about is just not reflective of reality. Harrison & Lear, the future management company for this complex, has provided data from 3 other similar apartment complexes within approximately 5 miles of this project. Those efficiencies in one-bedroom apartments have an average occupancy of 1.2 persons per unit. At that occupancy rate, with 42 units, it's safe to estimate this complex will house approximately 50 people. Furthermore, apartment operators are bound by fair housing guidance and the Uniform Statewide Building Code on the number of individuals per unit. Mr. Patel is permitted to set reasonable, non-discriminatory limits as to how many people can live in a given unit, up to the limit of 3 persons as provided by the zoning ordinance. Pursuant to that right, Mr. Patel intends to allow no more than 2 unrelated individuals to reside in an efficiency. Only if a child or person with some other protected status is associated with either of those individuals would there be 3 individuals in an efficiency, pursuant to his obligations under fair housing law. Additionally, fair housing guidance gives Mr. Patel discretion to consider other factors associated with such a situation, including the age of the child when deciding to rent any unit. We hope this information clearly conveys that even when unrestricted, units of this type simply are not attractive to more than 2 people. And then second, Mr. Patel and his manager of the property will not allow overcrowding. Now, the issue of parking. Based on the issues raised at Planning Commission, we have updated the management plan to reflect a parking plan for the property and to maximize on-site parking and to minimize the effect on public parking. Each unit will be assigned 1 spot, regulated by parking permits. If the occupant of a unit does not have a car, that spot can be provisionally assigned to another occupant who might need 2 spots. This system ensures that the use of on-site parking is maximized. Additionally, the folks with Harrison Lear have provided data on similarly situated apartment complexes to note that those apartments have approximately 0.8 cars per unit, and over 30% of the occupants report that they regularly rely on public transit. With the on-site parking plan and this data, we strongly believe this project will have little to no impact on the overall demand for public parking in this and the surrounding areas. As for on-site management, as you can tell by my previous references, Mr. Patel has engaged Harrison & Lear to manage this property. They're a well-established and experienced property management company in Williamsburg and on the peninsula. Because they manage several nearby properties, there will be a network of approximately 5 managers within a 10-minute drive of this property who are regularly available to respond to issues that may arise when the part-time manager is not on site. This level of access and service was an important factor for Mr. Patel when evaluating potential management companies and will result in a high level of service to residents of the complex. Finally, it's important for the public to understand how Mr. Patel and his family have operated this property. For 17 years, they've been solid corporate citizens of Williamsburg, making numerous improvements, continuing to invest in their property, ensuring that it remained attractive and well-kept, and that visitors felt safe and welcome. As the Smith travel numbers we submitted with our application indicate, despite these best efforts, this property is underperforming its comparative set nationally and in Williamsburg. Part of this poor performance, especially when compared to the competitive set in Williamsburg, is due to Mr. Patel's commitment to maintaining his property as a place for transient guests. Mr. Patel has not rented to long-term guests who would use an under-equipped motel room as a permanent residence, as many others in Williamsburg have. To date, this has been of great benefit to this area of town and has without a doubt contributed to the safety and security of the adjacent neighborhoods. As City Council is well aware, absent city intervention, there are limited examples of older hotel or motel properties either being adaptive or used, demolished, and redeveloped into new, different commercial use. Even with the city's active redevelopment efforts, many older, underperforming hotels remain. What you have before you today is a private industry response to a public sector problem. Conversion of this property from a motel to apartment use will eliminate an older, underperforming hotel and provide housing at a price point that is in high demand and is necessary for the working people of Williamsburg. In conclusion, converting this underperforming property is a win for the city, Mr. Patel, and most importantly, the future residents of the complex. I respectfully ask that you provide a favorable recommendation for its rezoning. Happy to take any questions. I'd also like to introduce Melissa Cook with Harrison Lear, who's happy to answer any management-specific questions, and John Harrison is here as well from Hopkins Associates. So.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. I think we'll reserve the questions until after the public hearing.
Thank you.
So we give everybody else a chance to speak. The first speaker's card I have is Gail Liakos. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Mayor, council members, thank you for giving me this few minutes. My name is Gail Liakos. I am a resident of Wyndham Plantation. We have been there for over 20 years. The Planned Development Housing District, or PDH, is a good plan. It was developed to meet a housing need not otherwise available in the city of Williamsburg and is a concept that will support a healthier and more diverse community when thoughtfully and carefully planned. To that end, the city zoning ordinance provides review standards for an applicant desiring to convert an existing hotel-motel into affordable housing. The owner of the Econo Lodge is one such applicant. On the surface, the application seems to check all the appropriate boxes. The location of the hotel-motel, check. The history of property maintenance and fire code violations, check. The proximity of the site to existing transit routes, check. The proximity of the site to pedestrian and bike facilities, check. The inclusion of housing suitable for seniors and persons with disabilities, check. The suitability of the proposed maintenance plan, check. The density that shall be determined upon net acreage, check. The compatibility of the adaptive housing facility with existing residential and commercial development, oops. Anyone who has ever gone through the experience of a renovation knows how the project is conceptualized on paper in plans and schematics is often very different in reality, simply because how one lives in the space is important. The council has already heard the concerns from a number of residents of the adjacent communities about the proposed density of this project. According to the application, with 42 proposed efficiency and one-bedroom apartment units, the residential density will be 47.5 dwelling units per net acre. The total acreage of the Econo Lodge is less than 1 acre at 0.885 acres. This is a density of 12.5 greater than the flats of Williamsburg, which sits on 2.88 acres and contains 100 adaptive housing units. The reality of this density is that it may check the box for providing affordable housing, but it is a false picture of providing for cooking, living, and sleeping space stated in the application. Parking is another concern which has already been expressed by residents of the adjacent communities and placed before the council. This concern was also stated at the Planning Commission public hearing on May 15th, so I will not rehash it here except to say this is another of those things that on the surface appears to check the box. The Planning Commission required the facility to provide 42 parking spaces, and the applicant proposes 42 parking spaces. The facility currently has 50 parking spaces, but some of those will have to be removed in order to provide landscape and open space requirements. In other words, parking spaces will meet the minimum requirement. However, as any good plan always hopes for the best and plans for the worst. So there are 42 proposed units which can house up to 3 persons. There is a possibility of 126 persons residing in the facility, but the plan only considers 42 of them. Granted, not all of them have cars, but perhaps some will have 2. And what about their guests? Where are they supposed to park? The answer, of course, is on Parkway Drive. So now the inadequate parking of the facility becomes the problem of all who live and travel on Parkway Drive. I also wish to restate my concern about the compatibility and the impact of adaptive housing on the adjacent communities. There are multiple studies on the impact of affordable housing on adjacent communities. The influence only becomes a negative one when it is concentrated in a small geographic location. The communities of Wyndham Plantation, Wyndham West, and Parkway Towns, excuse me, I lost my place. If this facility is approved for adaptive affordable housing, will be sandwiched between 2nd Street and Capitol Landing Road, and this concentration, as stated in all studies on this issue, will negatively impact the property values of the surrounding communities. Therefore, I ask the City Council, before it checks off this box, to consider this effect on the surrounding communities. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker's card I have is Mary Jane and Tom Ulrich.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I'm Mary Jane and Tom Ulrich. We're going to speak consecutively here. We live at 117 Parkway Court. Tom and I wrote an issue statement reflecting the issues that were raised at the Planning Commission hearing on May 15th. We sent that to the City Council and some of our neighbors at Parkway Towns and the Wyndham Plantation. We hope you've been able to honestly consider the concerns, and from what I've heard, it sounds like you have. I appreciate that. Thank you. 2 council members, the mayor and Councilwoman Ramsey, were kind enough to meet with us and speak with us, which was very helpful for us. And we'd like to thank you again for your time and your listening to our concerns. During those meetings, we were invited to try to honestly see the situation from your viewpoint and Mr. Patel's viewpoint, and we took that seriously. And in our reflections, we would share that even though we don't know Mr. Patel very well, he seems to be an honorable man and has been a good neighbor. We believe he would, to the extent of his resources, allow, he would probably try hard to keep up with and address the numerous, sometimes significant problems that invariably arise with this type of housing project. Mr. Patel has a right to a fair return on his investment and to make a decent living for himself and his family. It is both economically smart and morally right for the city to have housing in a wide price range for its citizens, especially affordable housing for those who need that type of housing. It's pretty clear that such housing diversity is necessary for a smooth functioning, secure, and simply a fun community to live in. We agree with all of that. Before moving to Williamsburg, I served as town clerk and later as assistant to the chief of police in our small Maryland community just outside of Washington, D.C. Because of that experience, Tom and I can easily see and be sympathetic to the complexity of the housing problem confronting the city of Williamsburg. Further, we understand the gigantic challenge the council has in attempting to balance all the interests that need to be represented. Because of that complexity, it's critical for there to be problem-solving approaches and that are really creative, evidence-based, and flexible. If the problem is going to be successfully solved, everyone impacted needs to be equally flexible and willing to tackle the problem together. Now, we residents would ask the council members who are making this decision on the rezoning application to please engage in the same exercise to see the proposed project from the perspective of the people who live and run their businesses in the area near the Econo Lodge. We feel that's a reasonable request.
And we can treat you as 2 different speakers, so if you go over 5 minutes.
I don't think we'll go over the time limit, certainly of the 10 minutes. For the past several days, you council members have received emails from residents who have attempted to share their concerns with you. That was an organized effect. Like with the issues statement we submitted, we hope and trust that you have read the messages and sincerely reflect on their content, what's truly being expressed. you can see that a litany of experience and fact-based issues and concerns have been raised with this adaptive housing proposal. Without going into detail, the two very significant ones are density and concentration. Both of those have already been addressed, but I want to speak further about that. Density in this particular housing proposal is way too many people living and parking in an area that is clearly too small. As has been pointed out through our written input, density brings with it a whole list of interrelated problems. The primary ones include overcrowded living spaces, even with the adjustments that have been suggested. Lack of overflow parking, even with the adjustments that have been suggested. Safety, especially for children. Maintenance upkeep, and a constantly moving, unsettled, transient population that's being targeted as the group of people who are going to be living there. And that list can get larger. You've read the numbers we've provided and must surely conclude that density is definitely a problem. The second issue is housing concentration. That is, the squeezing of a fourth affordable housing complex and second adaptive housing project within a mile of each other. The data we've supplied, and which is quite settled, clearly shows that affordable, low-income style housing, not the subsidized type. That is not what we're talking about
Sir,
either.
if you could address the council, please.
Sorry. That data that we supplied is quite settled, and it clearly shows that affordable low-income housing does not impact property and other neighborhood value negatively. However, as Gail pointed out, this is equally clear, and that is when housing is concentrated, and that's an important exception. And when that happens in one geographic area, it does affect the property value and the value of the neighborhood. The Econo Lodge housing project, if completed as proposed, will make our part of Williamsburg one of those concentration exceptions. For the good of our neighborhood and the city, this must be avoided. Where then, from the perspective of we neighboring residents and businesses, does that leave us? If you vote yes to the proposal as written, we fervently believe the neighborhood will enter into a downward spiral of deterioration. Several of us, as we've shared with you, have witnessed the reality of that in communities in which we have previously lived and or worked. We passionately want to avoid that in our Williamsburg community. On the positive side, we also believe that you council members, individually and as a team, have a creative spirit and are willing to explore reasonable yet different community development alternatives to find solutions to such problems this project will cause. We are witnessing such creativity with the new Midtown development. We further believe that you have the power, if you choose to use it, to offer appropriate, creative government incentives to help inspire and support different types of community development solutions. We finally believe that you have the real desire and ability to balance all those interests mentioned earlier by genuinely listening to, then incorporating those diverse interests into a creative solution to the common problems raised by the rezoning proposal. Therefore, we strongly recommend two actions. First, vote to table a final decision on the current Econo Lodge rezoning application. Then step back a little and relax. Try to get out of an either-or, we're boxed in mindset. Secondly, direct the city manager to work with the Econo Lodge owner, if he's willing, to develop one or two viable alternative options. Require those options to be based on deeper study, reflection, and input gathered at regular intervals during the development process from a representative group of residents. Make the process better. The options will then be deliberated and voted on by the City Council at a future reasonable, to-be-determined work session and council meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker's card I have is Kevin Lyles. Welcome, Mr. Lyles.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Kevin Lyles. I reside at 924 Pie Circle, Newport News. I am the Vice President of Community Impact for the Virginia Peninsula United Way. And United Way serves 8 different localities.
Mr. Lyles, could I ask you to speak up just a little bit,
Yes,
please?
I'm sorry. I can hear me fine. Again, my name is Kevin Lyles. I'm the Vice President of Community Impact for the United Way of Virginia Peninsula. United Way serves 8 localities locally, including the city of Williamsburg. We also operate an information and referral service that specifically serves Greater Williamsburg. United Way is guided by our collective impact agenda, Pathways Out of Poverty. And our definition of poverty not only includes those that are at or below the federal poverty line, but also those who are working but struggling to make ends meet. We call them ALICE. ALICE is an acronym for Assets Limited, Incomes Constrained, but Employed. And we think of those as working poor. Part of our Pathways Out of Poverty agenda includes 10 different community aspirations. Having a home is one of those. So we are grateful that you're considering this proposal and the difference it can make in the lives of some of the Williamsburg citizens. According to the newly released point in time count for 2019, 30 people were counted and surveyed who were experiencing homelessness in the city of Williamsburg versus 20 people in 2018. And those numbers don't include the folks that are living for months or even years in motel rooms because they can't find affordable housing to rent. We also know that the city of Williamsburg and James City County school systems, there are more than 400 children who don't have stable, safe places to call home, and some may be living in hotels or doubling up with family or even staying in shelters. While our 40 partner agencies, other nonprofit organizations, and social services team work to address crises like homelessness and housing needs, this proposal poses a long-term solution for many of these families and individuals who are elderly or disabled or just working parents trying to make ends meet, what we call ALICE. Having a home is crucial and critical element in healthcare outcomes, educational outcomes, and is essential to being gainfully employed. While the unique economy of Williamsburg relies on seasonal employment to a great deal and other wage earners, we must also ensure that we provide a diverse housing market that includes these individuals and these families. Thank you for your consideration of this.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker's card I have is Dr. John Whitley. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. John Whitley, 110 Governor Berkeley Road. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I stand to support PCR 19-0110 to rezone 0.885 acres at 216 Parkway Drive. I am pleased that BAJRANG LLC wishes to accommodate the housing needs of some of the citizens of our great city. I feel there is a sense of compassion to want to provide decent and affordable housing. I know there is also the reality of needing to retro a motel that can no longer compete as such in the marketplace into a property designed to meet housing needs. My next comments are not directed at all to BAJRANG LLC, but are put at the feet of City Council and the Chamber of Commerce. I find the rationale behind the proposal to be one of the most damnable examples of man's inhumanity to man perpetrated in an environment where old and new financial resources and wealth are abundant, but people are treated as property and are labeled the working poor. No person working 1, 2, 3 jobs should be so treated and so labeled. Just this past Monday, during your work session, you heard the new Director of Tourism from the Chamber tell you about plans being generated by the Tourism Council to expend the millions of dollars generated by Senate Bill 942, Tommy tax, 1%, and the contributions mandated by said tax from the dollars contributed by citizens of Williamsburg, James City, and York counties. The Tourism Council supposedly will spend these millions of dollars to make a significant financial impact on tourism, hospitality, and related retail businesses. These are the same businesses in which the working poor keep the doors open, the lights on, the money counted, and the services flowing. But the new tourism director did not utter one word about planning to see how some of this newfound wealth can and should be used to help those folk working for minimum wages and no benefits in our tourism, hospitality, and related industries. As a citizen of our great city and a strong and active participant in the work of the Chamber, I hold each of you accountable to become advocates for living wages and supportive benefits to workers. Plus, start standing against the negative impact of minimum wage and right to work laws on employees. Initiate and deliver a living wage campaign to recognize businesses supporting their employees with fair and equitable wages and benefits. I believe you have the will to stand up for the workers in our great city. Just do it. Stand up and approve PCR 19010. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At this point, I'll open up the floor to anybody else who would like to speak. If you could please, one at a time, approach the podium. If we have a number of people who'd like to speak, you're welcome to form a line in the back or just stay in your seat until there's a vacancy.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Scholander. I live at 160 Parkway Court in Williamsburg. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service to our community. The challenges that lay before you are made all the more complicated when our federal officials promote open borders that last month alone allowed more than 1 million immigrants to enter the United States illegally. That being said, I stand in opposition to the proposed change in zoning for the Econo Lodge on Parkway Drive, converting it from a motel to low-income housing. I assume that the Planning Commission has provided you with a copy of Ms. Liakos's presentation before it. On behalf of Wyndham Plantation, a statement I fully support and will provide to you if requested. As you know, the area of Williamsburg in question lies at a confluence of the city, York, and James City counties. Unless there is a council of governments, it is easy to lose sight of each of these entities' actions regarding affordable housing. This, in turn, has led to a concentration of such housing on the east side of the city and along Parkway Drive, Capitol Landing, Merrimack, 2nd, York, Hubbard, and Penniman streets. While all of these may not technically be voucher housing, many motels have residential units, a fact attested to by regular school bus stops. These motels include, but are not limited to, the Red Roof Inn, the Travel Lodge, the Super 8, the Colonel Waller, and Rochambeau motels. In addition, the neighborhoods in this part of the city are by and large modest and contain many reasonably priced rentals. It is important to also note that jobs for these low-income neighbors are by and large concentrated elsewhere in the city. Why not consider such housing where employment opportunities abound, such as Richmond Road, by Governor Berkeley Road, Newtown, and near Kings Mill and Busch Gardens? Continuing the concentration of low-income housing on the east side will further frustrate the private efforts of its businesses and residential communities to revitalize this part of the city and contribute to a growing perception of it being literally on the wrong side of the tracks. Thank you for your service, your time, and your consideration in rejecting this proposed rezoning.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Katie McKinney, and I had something written, but I think I'm just going to wing that. But I'm at 108 Parkway Court, and I love living in the area. I work for Colonial Williamsburg. I'm very close, and I believe one of the sort of workforce members that Mr. Foster is referring to. I'm an advocate of low-income and affordable housing and adaptive reuse, but I do not agree with the proposal as it stands. And I think even in just this meeting, there have been some changes that have happened since the planning meeting that make me feel a little uncomfortable with the plan even more, how it's proposed going forward. I've heard 2 different price points for rental units that were announced, so it doesn't. And then the changes in parking proposals don't give me much confidence in how this plan is going to be upheld going forward. One of my main concerns is density. I think we already have a parking problem. Our units in Parkway towns don't have very big driveways, and so a lot of our residents have to park on Parkway Drive as it is, and there's also the employees from Second Street Restaurant, and I have several times witnessed people just knowing that that's a place they can parking there for events in either the historic area or at somewhere like Virginia Beer Company. The stop sign or the stoplight survey and the parking study, I'm going to look into that as well, because I've noticed recently with 64 having a lot of construction, 2nd Street and 143 are used as an alternate route, and I take that drive or walk every day on my way to work, and so I witness the bottlenecking and the difficulties turning there. So I also kind of want to point out, in terms of being a member of that workforce and working for Colonial Williamsburg, loving that area, loving being able to walk, I don't think that the proposal, as proposed, provides adequate space for the type. I don't know who the targeted residents are at this point. I feel like I keep hearing shifting viewpoints on that, but I definitely know that we need lower income housing. I rent from a family member with hopes of someday owning my townhouse, and that's the only way I can live in the city of Williamsburg. Many of my coworkers and friends who have young families can't even really dream of living in the city, and they've looked elsewhere. So I think those are just some things I'd like for you to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Cindy Scholander. I live at 160 Parkway. We were the second residents of Parkway Towns. We are semi-retired. I earn $9 an hour. My husband drives Uber. And we were fortunate enough to sell our home when we moved to this home, which was to be our retirement home. We have a number of people that did what we did. And I can tell you that we were concerned in the beginning when we bought, because we weren't sure how the parking was going to work out well. Because even though our units obviously are much larger, it still was that we would only be able to have one car in a driveway, one car in a garage, and most cars don't fit in those garages. In our neighborhood, it is common to have 1 to 2 feet, maybe some nights 3 feet of car hanging out into the streets, because people can't even find parking spaces on your so-called Parkway Drive, which is accessible. It is not. When I come out in the mornings, our cars are still there because I have to be at work early, and so the cars are still parked. And we're parking right up to the edge, and I can't tell you how many times I've almost been creamed, because cars, that's a zone. That is, people are going to the Parkway or people are going up to the bypass. It's busy. And at night, if I have to go up when I get home from work in the afternoon, I might go to the grocery store, which no longer exists here except for Food Lion. We lost that, because if there's one word I'd use to describe where I live, and this breaks my heart, it's a fragile community. There are people like the Second Street Grill owner who is desperate to build us up again and to make us viable. I've wanted to talk to people at Colonial Williamsburg about developing more on our side of town. It's criminal that we put everything to the west side. That's wonderful. And just the few pioneers like Chichone's and the Velvet Shoestring, which is a secondhand furniture store, but it's lovely. People have tried desperately to bring it up. We paid cash for our home. We're in it, all in. This is our future. Right now, we have 8 guest parking spaces, and that's really ridiculous because there are very few guests that could ever find a space. They have to park on Parkway Drive. There is no parking on our street, by the way. No street parking on Parkway Court, which means that 30 units have a garage and a driveway that was intended for 1 car. People are using it to the street. In almost half of our homes, 2 cars are in the driveways right now because you can't get parking. The other problem that we have is that people don't trust the parking if they have open vehicles and whatever because of criminal elements that we've had already. What I'm trying to get to is that we already are dense. When our place was being built, I got there early. So I was there in January of 2016. Construction started in 15, and the first units were occupied in January of 2016. That said, I can tell you that every day, and I mean every day as the projects began, there were people from the city that were patrolling to make sure that every detail of construction was done to perfection. The builder, who was NVR Ryan Homes, went back, and I'm sure you've heard these stories, I don't think they're new to you, but the escalation of cost of the construction of our homes went through the roof because of the different things that we in Williamsburg want to so make perfect everything we do. I'm looking at these things and saying, my goodness, we had to change to a particular siding in order to accommodate the ARB and what was required there. I guess what I'm trying to get to is that we don't have a place to park right now. We have no street parking, so all of our overflow parking is there. And you all, through planning I guess it was, just said that these 30 units that can go up to over 2,000 square feet, 30 units were allowed to only accommodate 1/4 of a parking space for guest parking. If I'm telling you that there are people who reside there who are using our 8 guest parking spaces, which include a handicap space, 1 handicap space, and that we are already occupying this whole area. And I've even thought about getting a petition together to just say we have to have permitted parking on Parkway Drive because we have no room to park. The idea of having all of these new people in all of these cars, and it's a dream that there's going to be 1 car per unit. It's fantasy. So I guess I'm just asking you to really consider. I can't even imagine how anybody thinks that it's really humane to put so many people in such a small space. There are going to be children. We had to have a recreational thing. We had geriatric people at the time. We didn't have any kids at all. And we had to have a bocce ball court in order to fulfill the dreams of our city, which I think is great. We have a playground that is never used, but we maintain it meticulously because we don't have children for the most part. But we want them, but we're not going to have them if we have this kind of insanity in our little corridor. So I'm asking you to please have mercy on us, especially those of us who have made an investment, the businesses that have made an investment. We just want to make it better. We want the east side to be as glorious as the west side. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Welcome.
Kelly Scruggs, 119 Woodmere Court, Mayor Freiling, council members. Parking issues in Williamsburg, I could imagine. I would like to address this request for rezoning primarily in my position as a hotelier, an immediate past restaurateur, and an employer in the city. The city has long been fortunate to have an extremely low personal property tax rate, As you're aware, this rate has been possible to a great degree due to the taxes that are generated by the tourism industry. It's unfortunate that much of the staff that support this industry and keep it functioning cannot afford to live in the Williamsburg area, including the vast majority of employees I've hired over the last 20 years due to the lack of workforce housing. Knowing firsthand the difficulty for employees of both these industries to find housing, I applaud all of you for your consideration in seeking opportunities to increase the available stock of this housing. The applicant has given some examples of the economics involved for the demographic of renters he will be seeking. I'd like to detail a few other examples of what is involved with their budgets for those hardworking daytime members of our community. The cooks, housekeepers, and many people refer to as back-of-the-house employees because we never see them, at the very most make $14 to $15 an hour. I've used $14 an hour in my examples, and I can tell you that is on the high end. I'm sure y'all are probably aware of that. On an annual basis at 40 hours per week, it would amount to about $29,000 gross income per year. According to the city's housing assessment, housing is deemed to be affordable, and you have heard this, if 30% of less of gross income is spent on rent, including utilities. The amount for this rent for someone making $29,000 a year after taxes, because you got to figure at least 20% for taxes, the amount of rent that they could afford on that 30% level would be $725 before utilities. Just taking the rent amount from that pay would leave $1,208 a month or $278 a week. A lot of money. But that's got to cover the balance of their needs. That comes down to $40 a day to cover food, utilities, transportation, and many other items that we all need just day to day to get by. Obviously, it makes it near impossible for somebody making this money to live. Crazy thing is that although they can find cheaper rent in Newport News, Hampton area, that by the time you consider the cost of a car, repairs, and gas, the cost can they end up spending even more than their savings and rent. And 70% of my employees come from Newport News, Hampton. Once again, I commend our local elected officials for understanding these economic realities for many of our city workers and your continuing efforts to attempt to create affordable opportunities for them to be able to live in proximity to where they work. The approval of this application will meet a tiny fraction of what is needed for those most employees to become new neighbors. I would also like to thank the applicant, AJ, and his family for the past 17 years. They've worked hard to make that tiny little motel a success. Unlike some hotel owners, they continue to invest in their property and keep the property in good repair, even as occupancy and rates have continued to lag in our destination. He has done a terrific job of maintaining this property of very many challenges. I'm pleased to see that he is still vested enough in Williamsburg to consider this major investment for a new type of property that is still a risk. I wish him and his family the best and feel sure that you will confirm this request, and the city will make every effort to see this project completed with as little delay as possible. One more thing I'd add, after hearing the comments from adjacent property owners today, and I get it, I understand, I'm reminded of the first time a developer approached the city to request approval for a project on the same property they live on, similar to what many of those speakers live in today. Sitting on the Planning Commission at that time, I supported the developer even though other property owners on Parkway Drive were concerned about traffic, density, and many other concerns they were sure would affect their standard of living and the value of their property. Ultimately, these concerns, I believe, have proved to be overblown. I would welcome the new citizens that this property might allow. And I am a little concerned about some that would think those people. I can tell you, those people work for me. They are hardworking. They're good. We want them to be citizens here in Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address council?
Afternoon. My name is Teresa McGee, and I'm a property owner at 148 Parkway Court, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about my concerns. And first and foremost, my concern is the density. We're talking up to 126 people in an area less than 1 acre. 126. Yes, we can rely on Mr. Patel's good sense and sense of community to not rent to 3 people in every unit. But we have no guarantee of that. He certainly, under this proposal, could put 126 people in that 8.85 acres, and that's too many. If normal residency is 1.2 people per unit, why not write that into this proposal, that it will be rented only to 1.2 people over 42 units, bringing the population to 50 people? If that's what's anticipated, and if that's what's desired, then why not put it in writing? Why not be why not have that be your proposal? But beyond that, I'd like to look at the history of adaptive housing. In 2015, it was 100 units. 2 years later, it's 150 units, and you've increased the density from 16 units to 35 units per acre. And now 2 years after that, you're looking to increase that density to 47. 2 years from now, how many will be fitting into an acre? Will it be standing room only? The other thing I'd like to address is the criteria. One of the criteria is proximity to transit. There's no bus service. So how are these people going to get to their jobs? 1.6 miles to walk? Certainly your seniors and your unabled people aren't going to walk 1.6 miles each way to get to a bus so they can bring their grocery bags home. Chances are they're going to have a car, which speaks again to the parking issue and speaks again to this plan not meeting the criteria that you've set forth for consideration. So the proposed solution to only issue a parking permit of 1 per unit is fine, but that doesn't mean those people that are in that unit only have 1 car. That just means they can only park 1 car on that property. So the rest of them are left with foot traffic to get someplace or to walk somewhere between 0.8 and 1.5 miles to get a bus, to get groceries, to get to their job. So I would strongly urge you to look at that criteria and determine whether this plan meets it. The other issue, the other criteria I'd like you to look at is the compatibility of proposed development with the existing developments. The scale and the intensity of the proposed units are compatible. That's a bald statement, and it doesn't address how they are compatible. Is it compatible with the 30 townhouses that are presently at Parkway Towns? 30 townhouses, 14 people, 14 an acre versus 126 people per acre? I don't think that's compatible. I think that's anti-compatible. So I would like you to think about these things when you look at this proposal and decide whether it does truly meet the criteria and whether we're going to continually look at adjusting our plans to have denser and denser and denser populations within very small areas. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, okay. Seeing no one else coming forward, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for conversation, discussion.
Just a few questions for city staff. Drew, I was wondering if we could look into some of the concerns from the residents on the Parkway Court and Parkway Drive concerning parking in their neighborhoods. I think that merits further discussion. Hopefully we'd be able to work with the citizens on that front. And Carolyn, in terms of concentration, so how many other parcels of land throughout the city are zoned B2? You have one on Richmond Road, right? You have some on
Zone
Richmond.
B2?
B2,
You've got the properties on Second Street.
right?
You've got properties on portion of Page Street.
Okay,
You've got York Street, and you've got Richmond Road, basically from Bypass Road to the city line, which at James City County. So those are the properties that are zoned B2.
okay. I was wondering if I could ask some questions to the council. Thanks, Scott. First, let me begin by thanking Mr. Patel for his willingness to not revert back to weekly motel stays. I think that makes a big difference, notwithstanding this application, but as the previous comment had stated, some hotels revert to that status, and we've obviously seen some consequences from that. And obviously, we always want to find a solution towards that end.
Correct.
So Caroline mentioned that there are several other areas of B2, and one of the comments we've heard from concerns from the citizens today is the concentration in that one particular area. So in terms of the highest and best use in your letter in analyzing that parcel, I think it's unique because with this zoning designation, there's only a 150 cap. So my question to you is, why is this parcel in particular the highest and best choice for that particular location?
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another B2 parcel that's as small as this one and is located on a side street. Carolyn pointed out the remainder of the B2 district primarily on entrance corridors, particularly Richmond Road. I know council's guarded Richmond Road closely as high-value commercial real estate for years.
Right. In terms of some of the parking and density concerns that we just heard from other residents, do you have any response to that? Anything you wanted to add?
Just maybe to reiterate my earlier comments that the data from similarly situated complexes does not indicate that there'll be a parking problem associated with this project. At 0.8 cars per unit, at other complexes that even have higher bedroom counts than one bedrooms and efficiencies, I think we're in a good position to be able to accommodate parking on site.
Right. And I guess in terms of something you can help me gain a better understanding. So Mr. Patel has received a city grant before, right? When he's reinvesting in his property. Now he's willing to reinvest in property now.
Exactly.
To create this into adaptive housing units. I mean, how does that affect property values surrounding the area?
So I can say that other parcel that has availed itself of this zoning designation that we're applying for, their assessment by the city assessor increased significantly after rezoning. So the tax value as a piece of property was much greater as an apartment use than an older low-function motel.
Right. In terms of, the only other unit that I'm aware of that has this, and in fact, I know for sure, is the flats of Williamsburg.
Right.
So let's talk that a little bit. I'm sure when you were going over things with the applicants, you probably looked to the flats.
It's the only other relevant example.
Right. And in terms of rezoning, as a matter of what we have to do when we deliberate, we do it on a case-by-case basis. And in terms of, it's not the same exact fit, but in terms of the rezoning aspect, there are generally some observations with that. So you mentioned the 1.2 princess per unit. I'm assuming you're referring to the flats of Williamsburg.
Flats and several other complexes in addition to the flats. So that's not the only example that went into that calculation.
I mean, I might ask this to city staff, but are you aware about what's the parking situation with the flats?
That's representative of the 0.8.
Okay. Have you been aware, or I guess maybe I should ask Mr. Trivette, have you been aware of any big disruptions with the flats of Williamsburg as in terms of general welfare or safety? Has it posed any concerns to city staff, to our public safety personnel, anything?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I may have more questions for you, council, but thank you.
Is that all the questions for everyone?
So,
For
yeah,
right
yeah,
now?
for
Okay,
so far,
okay.
yeah.
You can reserve the right to.
Thank you,
Ms. Ramsey.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and I have some questions for both Carolyn and for Mr. Foster. So, Carolyn, a comment was made about when the Parkway Towns was designed and approved, the ARB had to approve certain aspects of it. Do you know if they had to approve the parking plan that Parkwood Towns has?
No, parking is approved by Planning Commission as part of the site plan, and the ordinance requires 2 parking spaces per unit plus a quarter space for visitor parking. So that's why you have 2 spaces on each lot, and then you have the 8, as the lady mentioned, 8 visitor spots at the end of the development.
So it was considered that a garage was one spot and a driveway was the second spot?
That's correct.
And any issues with the size of the garage or the length of the driveway was more an issue with the developer as opposed to with ARB or anyone else?
The garage is the developer. The length of the driveway was such that we made sure you could get 1 parking space on the lot without overhanging over the sidewalk. So our parking spaces are 9 by 18, so that was the requirement for outside of the units.
And there's no street parking in Parkway Towns?
That's correct, because of the width of the street and the development and driveways, there's no parking on the street.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that was sort of, when it was built, that's the way it was as far as a garage and a driveway for people to have as their parking capability.
That's correct, 2 spaces.
And living in the city, I think any and all of us recognize that there are parking challenges all around. If you live in a neighborhood with a lot of rentals, student rentals, there are some of those. So we talked about cost burden for housing and workforce housing. There's been a lot of comments about low-income housing. And with what you were talking about as far as the sort of the types of people who would be working here and their starting wages. So where does low income fit in as far as
As a definition?
As a definition and as a wage earner, kind of.
So I can access that, but that data was derived from the 2018 housing study for the city done by Sarah Stafford. Several categories. Low income was not just one category. There was very low. For the purposes of this project, we've analyzed it up to the bottom half of what they call the middle income. So are you looking for a specific price range?
Well, I guess I'm just thinking that if it's people working at minimum wage, they're not going to be able to afford these units, I would.
Actually, if 2 people together
would.
In an efficiency at minimum wage, you are right on the cutoff on the good side of the cutoff for the 30% rule.
Let me see, what else did I have here? Oh, and as far as options for the owner, what other considerations has he had? Do you know?
The only other serious consideration would be like an office use, and the size of the building would have to be very small to accommodate, as Ms. Murphy pointed out, to accommodate the parking requirements and the required landscaping. So it would be difficult. And not to mention, there's not much demand for office space on the site now.
And he would still have to get financing
Exactly.
to support any redevelopment that he wants to do there. And with this proposal, he is still planning, there's still a significant investment that he is planning.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And is the owner planning on selling the property after the conversion?
No plans to sell.
So the way that he keeps and maintains the hotel now would be indicative of the way that he would maintain it afterwards?
Absolutely.
I would assume that it's all market rate, and so just sort of like any other place, the better it looks, the more you're going to be able to rent it. And Carolyn, if a hotel is depressed and doesn't get a lot of rentals, just by hotel guests, do they have to get approval to become or rent long-term to people?
No.
As long as it's less than 30 days?
There's certain hotels that can rent a little bit longer if they have cooking facilities, but there's no permit for a hotel to do a conversion on that. It's basically done on a complaint basis, and we have to prove that individuals stay in the units more than 30 days. So it's very difficult for zoning staff to make that call to be able to know if someone's living in a unit more than 30 days. Because anything 30 days or less is a visitor. More than that, you're not considered a visitor in the zoning ordinance.
So if Mr. Patel had wanted to convert to that type of usage, he could have started renting out up to 30 days?
No. He can rent currently up to 30 days.
Right. Without going through all of the process.
You're considered a visitor.
Right. So, okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
A couple questions for the applicant on the management plan. I take it there's no resident manager.
No, sir. Part-time manager.
So there's a part-time manager, which is the on-site manager. How many hours do we expect that manager to be on-site?
I think that's still to be determined. Harrison Lear may be able to speak directly to that, but as I pointed out, there'll be about 5 folks in the neighborhood at various other properties. So there's not a full-time on-site manager, but there is someone full-time on call. So.
And then you also mentioned a property manager. So how many hours would the property manager be on-site?
So I believe those are the same position.
Well, the on-site manager is supervising the property manager, so are you supervising yourself then?
I understand your question now. Those are definitely questions for the management company. I don't have this detail.
And I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're here to speak to that.
Hello. I'm Melissa Cook with Harrison and Lear.
So how many hours would you expect the on-site manager to be on-site?
Initially, throughout lease-up, they will be there full-time, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. After that time, as he said, it's to be determined. We do believe it's going to be between 25 and 35 hours per week, so almost close to full-time still.
And then what about your property manager?
The property manager is the on-site manager. It's one and the same. Different titles, but it's the same person.
So I think I better understand your question now. Property manager is the one who will actually attend to and do the maintenance and oversee the maintenance.
So would maybe the term maintenance manager be better?
So there will be a property manager and a maintenance technician. So there'll be 2.
So reading from your management plan, it says the on-site manager will oversee and manage the work of a property manager. So are you saying the property manager is not the on-site manager, but is the maintenance manager?
No, I don't.
What are you saying?
It's not worded.
So Ted, I believe that the timing is off here on this management plan. I drafted that prior to Harrison Lear being hired. So the nomenclature that they use and what is reflected in reality is what she's telling you today.
Correct.
That is an April document.
So we might want to update it, the management plan. So then one other question on the management plan, the CCTV system, who will be monitoring the cameras?
The on-site staff will have access to the monitoring of the cameras as well as the owner of the property, Mr. Patel.
So will anybody be monitoring them on a 24/7 basis?
There's an app for where you can log in at any time, 24 hours a day, and view the system, as well as when we're on site, we'll have the TVs to be able to review them in person.
So at night when nobody's on site, who will be looking at them?
There wouldn't necessarily be somebody looking at them 24 hours a day, but we have the capability to pull up the footage at any time. So
So they're helpful after the fact?
if needed, yes.
Okay, that's all questions I had on the management plan. One question, we've had some discussion about the adequacy of the zoning requirements for parking. So when I went by this morning, went by the townhouses, there seemed to be quite a lot of cars that were the second car in the driveway, which means they were blocking the sidewalk, which means the sidewalk was not usable. To me, that may indicate that maybe the zoning requirement was not adequate in this situation. How would you comment on that?
That's something we can look at, and I can ask Planning Commission, we can study that also as part of the comp plan update. Maybe there needs to be a different parking requirement for townhomes than other dwelling units.
Okay, thank you.
There's another element involved there as well. Mr. Patel's observation, the Wyndham properties don't allow commercial vehicles. Yeah, thank you. Don't allow commercial vehicles to be parked in the neighborhood overnight. So if you live in that neighborhood and are a landscaper or a plumber or have a wrapped vehicle of any type, you're not supposed to be in that neighborhood. That does generate some parking demand on Parkway Drive.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Foster, I have one question for you and then maybe a few for Ms. Murphy. What can Mr. Patel do effectively to enforce the 1 car per unit?
You mean on site?
I understand there's a permit or some indicator that can be put in the dashboard or somewhere in the car that shows that this is the vehicle that's allowed to park in that space because it's assigned to that unit. But is there any lease component or anything that will, where the resident will? Okay.
So the 1 car per unit will be a term of the lease. So the resident will acknowledge that by signing the lease.
And so if there are people then who have multiple cars, Mr. Patel has recourse?
That is correct.
That's all I have for you right now.
Okay, thank
you. Ms. Murphy, what is the PDH density limit? I keep hearing the number going from 35 to 47, but 35 was, as far as I'm aware, was not a number that was set as a limit for the PDH zone.
That's correct. I think you've got to look at each hotel property on its own merit, and it's based on the hotels that are located in the B2 district. So I'm sure if there were more units allowed somewhere else in the B2 district, that the density would be different because the lot size and the number of units on that piece of property would be different. So yes, there is no set density limit put on the PDH district. That was part of their review process, as doing the review of each hotel site. So each hotel site will have a different density. If you were to allow every hotel in the B2 district, the density would fluctuate up and down depending on the number of units on that piece of property and the lot size of the piece of property.
So it was in the opinion of staff then that this density would work on this?
Yes, and I think you're looking at a building that has currently 48 motel units and is looking to go down to 42 adaptive housing units. So the density has been reduced in somewhat because you could also look at 48 separate units at that piece of property, and that would be a different application.
Do you have, and I can appreciate you may not know the answer to this, but just in case you do, I'll ask it. Do other apartment complexes, all other apartment complexes or any other apartment complexes in the city have round-the-clock management presence?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay. What is the recourse, and Ms. Shelton, please chime in here if this is a question for you, but what is the city's recourse if there is failure to adhere to the management plan as eventually approved?
The management plan is part of the zoning, so it would be a violation of the zoning ordinance, and we would pursue a complaint for that.
And we do that with a notice to the property owner?
We do that with a notice of violation. They have 30 days to correct the violation. If they fail to correct the violation, we take them to court.
Okay. And what happens if, as some have suggested, the property may not be kept up in time? and the building deteriorates?
Then it becomes an issue for the property maintenance staff. So there are minimal.
Of the city?
Yes. There are
Not to be
minimal.
confused with the property manager.
Property maintenance staff of the city. There are minimal building code requirements that have to be met for different uses, and they will have to meet those for this use.
Okay. Those are my questions for now. Come back. Other questions, Mr.
Yeah,
Zhang?
just one more, Council, if you don't mind. We've heard opinions of residential neighbors today, but any input from your commercial neighbors nearby?
I believe
Parcel.
several of the commercial neighbors have expressed support to Mr. Patel, but I have not personally talked to them.
Okay. Well, they're not here and we haven't received input, so. Yeah, generally thinking, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Oh, other questions?
No. Okay.
Ms. Ramsey?
No, actually, I had that question.
Okay.
but-
Okay. It just popped into my mind the last
Me
minute.
too.
No, generally thinking is, I think first, I just want to reiterate the need that we have spoken in our last State of the City, and it's a GIO of the city to establish an affordable housing work group. And I know that's in the pipeline and works, but this is certainly one of those conversations where we need to start having it. Although I think differently for this case, even though we are discussing affordable housing, I think we have seen broader themes come upon parking and also density conversations, along with wrapping with what kind of working class folks might be residing there. But I think there's been a whole confluence of issues that are touched upon with this particular parcel today. In terms of affordable housing, the aspect from the application, I appreciate the applicant's willingness to put this in the market rate towards the lower tier. I think it is something that we absolutely need to have, and it's a compelling goal of the city to continue to deliberate and support reasonable projects that fit along the city's guidelines, and I think that will be further reinforced once we establish such work group. I think Mr. Patel's good character and his willingness to not put this and revert it to weekly motel stays and keeping on reinvesting on the property is persuasive, but should not be dispositive towards this application. And in terms of the parking and density that have been outlined by the neighbors, I hope we can continue working with it. I think there's been I like to see the blueprint for the parcels over there in terms of parking. Ted, you raised a good point about having that further discussion about parking requirements, maybe for townhomes and apartments. That certainly will intrigue me, and I wish we had it earlier as well. I'm certainly sympathetic, but in terms of looking at analysis, our zoning powers, we are adhered to general welfare, public necessity, public use, and safety. I am persuaded that safety requirements will be held based on the questions and conversations we've had. And in terms of the general interests of the city, I think we need to have this kind of parcel, and I'm satisfied by the applicant's analysis that this is the highest and best use of the parcel. I was looking for more input in terms of that realm, and I think I've been satisfied based on what I've heard. So I will support staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just have a few comments as well. After watching the Planning Commission meeting, one of the members said that two of the big things that came out to him were parking and density, and I think that's been a recurring theme throughout the time, and I think a lot of the issues with parking at Parkway Town Court is because of the way that that was designed and built. It sounds like that, as I say, a lot of their issues are such by not having space. And I think that having the sticker for and limiting one car per unit sort of solves that problem. And I accept the fact that it might not be completely enforceable, but by having it in the lease, I think that takes us a step closer to making sure that the tenants adhere to that. And as far as the density, this was one thing that did concern me when I read the application, because I did not feel that 3 people, or the likelihood of 3 people in a unit would be acceptable. And so knowing sort of the reality of what is currently at the flats and represented through other apartments that Harrison Lear manages at a rate of 1.2, and coming up with 50 people sort of fits in with what the nearby residents were hoping to have as a maximum. Again, I think that there are some fair housing regulations that might come into play, but I feel sure that Mr. Patel is going to try to keep with that limit as much as possible. So for me, the density issue has pretty much been taken care of. And I think there has been a great misconception of who will be renting. I didn't realize until I got involved with housing and city council exactly what was meant by workforce housing and who fits that category. And in addition to the different categories and individuals and ranges of pay that Mr. Foster mentioned, one that came to mind to me was also the military. So I pulled up what the military enlisted rates are, wages are, and someone would need to be an E5 before they qualified even to have the rate for the wages to afford to pay $750 a month. And I know when I worked at my post-retirement job as a contractor to Colonial Williamsburg that I wouldn't even have been able to afford an efficiency. So, you know, there are a lot of people in a lot of different job categories in this city that I don't think we realize are cost burdened. And if they had a place where they could be, where it was more affordable, then perhaps they wouldn't have to work 2 jobs, and perhaps they would be able to become volunteers in the community and to become invested more like the rest of us, instead of being so concerned with how to pay for housing and insurance and everything else. When I went over to visit, and one other thing about parking, I've driven by the flats a few times, and I have never noticed an abundance of cars at that property. And I think part of it goes with the number of people who are living there, the 1.2, but also the fact that they're out working. If they're not working a day, there's probably some working at night. And so I think that that's another thing to consider. And I think we also have to think about the resurgence of 2nd Street and why we have more traffic there. It's because a lot of effort has gone into revitalizing that area. People who live in Parkway towns don't remember when the only thing on that street was a lot of tire stores and 2nd Street Bistro. But now there's a lot of opportunities. The shops where the Velvet Shoestring, Koshan are, and you've got other entities down the street. But when I went over to visit a resident at Parkway Towns last week, I stopped by the hotel property afterwards just to get a sense of it. And one thing that came to my mind looking at it was that this was an owner who cared for the property. And I would assume that all of the individuals who are concerned about the property disintegrating into a lot of problems have been by there to notice that there are flowers planted there. It's very well kept. There was even someone using a leaf blower in the parking lot, and there wasn't a single car there, but they were very concerned to keep the place neat, and that impressed me. And I thought, if someone is that concerned with keeping up a property when there's no one coming, then what are they going to do as far as trying to maintain a property where the exterior of the property will help bring in clients? And so, like Mr. Zhang, I support staff's recommendation for the ordinance.
I definitely support the PDH conversion process and the creation of workforce housing. However, I don't believe that the density and parking proposed is realistic for this site, so I would not support that.
Is that the extent of your comments? Okay.
Do I have to say more?
No, I'm just curious. I didn't want to cut you off. So several years ago, well, we've been talking about housing issues and the question of affordability on City Council for a very long time. The number of solutions we've come up with have been small. And of course, we have public housing in the city. None of those properties are in this area, but for a city our size, I think we do a pretty good job through the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of providing that type of housing. A few years ago, we created an opportunity to help aging motel properties that were no longer viable in the current market, particularly due to the way they are arranged with exterior entry, and gave them an opportunity to convert those into properties that would help fill another need in this community, which is that housing question. That's what this application is an attempt to do. It's the private sector coming forward without tax money, without city support, without federal support, to create the kind of housing we need for the people who live and work in this community to have a home. And that having a home part is really important, because when you are a transient resident of a hotel property, as careful as we all might be, some of us may be, Mr. Zhang, you're probably the most careful. It's not the same as when it's your home. It's the same concept when you rent a car. I try to be very careful with rental cars, but maybe sometimes I'm not as attentive to the rental cars as I might be to my own. I know on the whole, based upon the rental cars I get, they age very quickly because people don't feel committed to that piece of property. Just like people don't feel committed to something they're going to live in for a week. But when people have a home, it's their place. It's special to them. It's what, you know, we all dream of home ownership, and all of us aren't going to achieve that. Some of us just dream of home rentalship, and that's really important to folks. So here's the private sector coming forward to provide this type of housing. Mr. Patel has been an exemplary custodian of this particular property for 17 years, and he's been doing that recently at a 28% occupancy. He's spending a fair amount of resources, of the few resources he's getting as a rental, to keep the property up. Imagine what he could do if he had 90+% occupancy and a regularly reliable source of income. There's absolutely no reason to suggest that he would do any less than he's currently doing, and more than likely would do more, because he's proud of the property that he owns and runs. And if he doesn't, the city has recourse, because we have the property, we have people checking on property to make sure they comply with code, and that we don't have problems with deterioration, and we enforce that. This project is in line with the comprehensive plan. It fits the purpose of the PDH zoning designation. It was recommended by staff after working with the applicant. It has unanimous approval by the Planning Commission. And yet we have a number of residents who are still very concerned, and we understand that. And the Planning Commission heard you, we have heard you, we heard you before today, and we've heard you today. And the applicant has heard you. And along the way, the applicant has modified his proposal to meet some of those concerns. Now, I can appreciate everybody's not going to come out of this room today agreeing, and I understand that. But I just want to, I want people to know that even if you don't like the outcome, maybe you're not thrilled with the process, the applicant has been listening and responding. The parking is in line with the zoning. We can look at the zoning, we can evaluate it going forward. Do we have enough parking? We've had issues with properties, not as much with residential, but with commercial, where we end up with too much parking for the business, and then it creates a sea of asphalt that's unnecessary. I don't think that's going to happen here, because I think this is right in line. It's right in line with what the zoning suggests, but it's also right in line with what the evidence that we have from the property management company that has experience with multiple other properties, and they do not have one car per unit, much less more than one car per unit. We also have the knowledge that parking enforcement by Mr. Patel through the permit will be a part of his lease. And so if people violate that, he has recourse with those tenants. And additionally, I believe Mr. Patel has modified the parking lot to some degree that will allow for 5 more on-street parking spaces that will be open to anybody, not just his residents, but anybody in any of the surrounding neighborhoods or patrons of the surrounding businesses to use. The density question, I can appreciate that too. It does seem like it is a small piece of property, and it does seem like a lot of units. I cannot imagine 124, 128 people living in that property, but it could be a possibility. But the data suggests it's going to be 1.2 people per unit. This is not somebody's guess. This is data based upon prior experience. That would result in 50 people living there. And that's in properties that do not have any proffered or offered or willingly voluntary effort to limit the number of people in a unit as long as it's in accordance with federal fair housing laws, as Mr. Patel has offered. So we've got data that says it'll be 1.2 people per unit or 50, and on top of that, Mr. Patel is going to do what he can legally to keep the occupancy down. My experience may not be relevant to anything here, but I've heard a lot of experiences from folks who are here today, and so I just feel compelled to share mine. I was the youngest of 7 children. I grew up in a house with 1 bathroom. You know, and I'm telling you, as the youngest, I got last dibs on that space. We had 1 car. My dad worked really hard, and my mom stayed home to try to rein us in. And, you know, I don't know, maybe we weren't the greatest kind of people, but we thought we were pretty good neighbors, and I had a great childhood. I loved it. As a young single adult, having just graduated from William and Mary and seeking to establish a career and maybe make this community my home, I had to live in a variety of rental arrangements, and I always had to have roommates because there was nothing like this with the efficiency arrangement. I had to share my personal space with other people. It was still pretty great. Might have been greater if I could have had my own place. Now my family and I live in an area surrounded by high-density housing. We probably have the widest range of income levels in our property value levels where we are. And that includes publicly subsidized housing nearby. And I don't know, I love it too. It's just great. It's great to be in Williamsburg, and it's great to be downtown, and it's great to see different types of people, and I'm glad everybody doesn't look like me or sound like, well, I'm really glad they don't look like me, but I'm glad people are different, and I get to mix with those people, and that's what makes my life richer. So I hope that when this project comes online, that everybody in that community feels enriched by it because it'll create a more diverse residential experience. It will accomplish an important need for this community in providing the type of housing for people who give so much to Williamsburg, and it's so often easy to overlook them. But they're people too, and they want a home. And so for all those reasons, I'm going to support this.
Good. So I move that City Council approve proposed ordinance 19-11 to rezone .885 acres at 216 Parkway Drive from Corridor Business District B2 to Planned Development Housing PDH.
Second.
Ms. Bertram?
Mr. Maslin?
Nay.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons is recused. Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Motion passes. This takes us to our reports. The first is a monthly financial statement. Mr. Trivette, anything you want to pass along?
You know, I think in the interest of time, we will just say that the numbers are consistent with what we would expect at this point in the fiscal year. We're still monitoring things pretty closely as we wind down the FY19 to make sure that we hit the marks and make any adjustments that might need to be made. Of course, I've told all of you that we don't officially close the fiscal year until about September, so any numbers that we give you as far as forecasting are subject to change till we get to that date.
Any questions for Mr. Trivette on financials?
No, sir. No, sir.
Departmental operating reports?
The only thing I wanted to mention about departmental operating reports is we've been forecasting now for a few months a change in the software that we use to do those. We're going from Socrata to a product called My Sidewalk. One of the reasons that we're making that change is because we have acknowledged that the Socrata reports were not as valuable as we wanted them to be. It used to be that we were using 2 different platforms to collect performance management data, and it was an overabundance of data, most of which wasn't being used at all, and weren't indicators of progress. So my sidewalk, we are hoping, is going to be somewhere in the middle of that path between too much data and not enough data. We're excited about what My Sidewalk offers in terms of being able to compare those performances against other benchmark communities and data sets that are available through, say, the U.S. Census or even the University of Virginia. So as you look at the operating reports for this month, you can use the new link that we provided you. You'll be able to see that difference and drill down into the data. As we move through the months in the coming months, that will get even better as we are able to focus down the product and sort of rein in all the data that we're providing.
Questions?
Forward to seeing it.
Oh, welcome back, Mr. Pons.
Thank you.
City Manager report, Mr. Trivette?
2 things I want to talk about there. I'll start with the first one, and that is parking, since we were just talking about it so eloquently. The issue that what I wanted to highlight is in the Prince George parking garage. As you know, we've been working to deploy the new software that we purchased and working with the partners that purchased that software as we were putting it out into the field here in Williamsburg. And we've encountered some challenges. As customers have used the software, one of the things that we attempted to do is install a process by which you were only paying for the time that you absolutely used. And in order for us to do that, that required a patron to use the pay stations twice, a check-in and a check-out procedure. Obviously, that was an inconvenience because you have to visit the pay station 2 times. Most of the places that people park these days, especially using those types of kiosks, are only visiting the pay station 1 time. It's a prepay environment. So recognizing that frustration, hearing from a lot of customers, particularly on special event days, including the farmers market days, we are going to switch our system at the Prince George parking garage to a prepay environment, and that change will occur on Monday. Once we make that change, you will have 3 ways to pay for parking in the Prince George parking garage. The first will be to use the pay stations, prepay environment, so you will park, determine how long you think you need, and pay for that time. If you need more time, you simply revisit the pay station, or you drive out when you leave, and we will bill you for the difference using the license plate reader technology. Another option, and the one that we prefer, and we will be advocating for people to use, particularly those that are frequent users of the garage, is to sign up for an account in advance. There's a way to do that through the city's website, and when you do that, you can register as many vehicles as you own, drive in and out of the garage unhindered, not visiting the pay station, and simply we are charging your on-file credit card for the amount of time that you have to be there. So it's a very convenient way to do it. It's exactly the method that we envisioned when we deployed this system. We want it to be available to more people in an even easier fashion, and we're working to that every day, but we're not quite there yet. And then the third way, of course, is to simply drive in and drive out. Now, we discourage you from doing that because it's very difficult for us to keep track of it and send out the bills. But that is an option if you so choose it.
Can I add something to that, please?
Sure.
On option number 2, I have signed up our car on the parking garage, and it is great. You drive in, you don't visit the pay station when you arrive, do your business, you go back to your car, you drive back out, you never go to the pay station. And within now about 24 hours, maybe even shorter, a little email comes with here's how much your credit card has been charged. So I would encourage anybody who's local, who thinks they might use the parking garage even periodically, to do that advanced sign up because the convenience factor is terrific. In fact, I think I'm using the parking garage now more than when you just paid because it's just easy.
And to do that, one goes on just the city website.
There's a link on the city website. We're also pushing this out as much as we can. We've got a press release that's going to go out, I think, tomorrow that outlines all of this in a much more efficient fashion. It even details the actual steps of using the pay station. Bear with us as we continue to try and make this work the best that it can. One of the ways that we're trying to promote it is that if you choose option 3, which as I said again, we hope you won't, you will receive on your car in the parking garage an encouragement notice, for lack of a better term, that explains the options available to you and encourages you to that option number 2 of registering your car or cars in the system so that you can just drive in and drive out and we're able to bill you efficiently. The other report, Mr. Mayor, is on recycling. As we've talked about numerous times, we are about to make a significant change to the recycling program in the city, not because we want to, but because we have to. And we've asked Mr. Clayton to come and go over the specifics of that quickly one more time.
Okay. As you probably heard by now, the current 5-year contract we have through the Virginia Peninsula Public Service Authority, or VPSA, is with County Waste, and it expires July 1 of this year. So the last collection by County Waste will be on Wednesday, June the 19th. County Waste will be collecting their carts at the same time, and we think we'll get through most of the carts the same day, but there might take a little longer. It might go the following day because it takes longer to collect the carts than it does to get the recycling, mainly because they have to take the wheels off and stack them in cars and stuff. So the new contractor is Tidewater Fiber, TFC, and they handle a lot of the south side Hampton Roads area and was our contractor at one point, so they're familiar with the area and the recycling business. James City County, York County, and Poquoson are all part of this contract with TFC. Highlights of the new recycling contract. First of all, the carts. TFC will be delivering new carts to residences. The carts will be gray with tan lids to distinguish them from the county waste carts, which are green lids. The time frame for delivery is June the 15th through the 25th. But we have heard today that Williamsburg is the first in line to get the new carts, so most likely next week, say by Wednesday or Thursday, everybody should have new carts. Each cart will have what we are calling the bag of knowledge attached to it, which has all the details of the recycling program. The collection day. Collection day for recycling will be the same day of the week as your garbage collection. Garbage is collected on Mondays and Tuesdays, so your recycling will be collected either on a Monday or a Tuesday. And we think this same day garbage recycling would be a positive thing for the residents. And remember that recycling remains every other week. The third thing I want to mention is the materials collected. The only change in the accepted materials is with the plastics. Number 1 and 2 plastics, like your water bottles, your milk jugs, detergent bottles, will be accepted, and the other plastics, such as the butter cups, yogurt cups, etc., will not be accepted. This is due to the fact that there just isn't a market at this time for these type plastics, and we hope this will change so we can start accepting more plastics in time. And finally, the cost of service, which we've talked about before. The current rate for a household is $1.58 per house per month, and the new rate is going to be in the neighborhood of $6.04. And as we've all talked about, the primary reason for recycling costs increasing is that the U.S. lost China, who was our largest market of recyclables from the U.S., and this caused the recycling in the U.S. to go sideways, and a number of jurisdictions in the U.S. did away with recycling or passed the extra cost to the citizenry, and we were fortunate enough to continue our practice of not charging a separate recycling fee to our residents. We hope that domestic markets will be developed to drive the cost down, and we actually have a reopener clause in the contract should things turn around.
So, Mr. Clayton, if I may...
I've got a list here I'd like to read real quickly of what we've done on the communication side of getting the word out. So Leanne's given me this list of 10 things here, so I'll try to run through them real quick. Public Works staff provided a presentation to the Neighborhood Council. We also did a presentation to the Brandywine Homeowners Association, provided flyers and brochures to the Williamsburg Library and Municipal Building Lobby for distribution to the public. Communications staff included information on the new recycling program in the city's May, June e-newsletter, and additional information will be going out in the June-July e-newsletter. And we have information scrolling on channel 48. We placed an ad in the Virginia Gazette yesterday, and we'll run another ad this Saturday. We had a news release was sent to local media and local government public information officers. A news item was added to the city's website homepage, and the news item was emailed to those signed up for the city updates and news. Just a couple more. The new webpage focused on the new recycling program was published last week. Go to the williamsburgva.gov/new recycling. And recollect announcements are there to gather information. And finally, the staff is promoting the new recycling program on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor.
So, Mr. Clayton, if I may
Yeah.
just clarify, the cost of recycling is going up by a factor of 4, but the residents will not see any of that. The city's absorbing that in our operational budget.
That's correct.
And you mentioned the change in plastics, where the recycling provider will only accept 1 and 2, but they still accept glass and cardboard and paper.
Everything else stays
So
the
it's
same.
only
It's
the
just the
3,
plastics
4,
different.
5, 6, and on up.
3 through 7. Mhm.
Okay, any questions?
Bins will be the same size?
Yes.
I recall when we took on VIPSA, there was an option for a second can.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes. And we've had questions about,
They're larger.
since we're cutting back the plastic, some people have questioned that, they need a larger garbage can because they're not recycling as much. And so we can make changes to the garbage. Also, the other thing I want to remind everybody is this initial passing out of all these carts, if you don't like what you got, we'll start replacing those come August 1, but we need a period in there for transition, let people see if they need a different cart. So you can change your cart size, your recycling cart size, but not starting until August 1st.
Dan, thank you for your presentation. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
A couple items. So we also, at the NRT meeting, we passed out the brochures, which created a lively discussion. I'm sure you heard about it.
Yeah.
But some of the questions that came up were, where's the landfill? Another question was, well, right now I like the different days because if I see oil on the pavement, I know whether it's a trash truck or a recycling truck. Do you want to talk about that? We've changed vendors.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a point, but I mean, don't have much to say to that. But
what about the landfill? Where is our landfill?
That goes down to Hampton. The Tidewater Fiber has a landfill, but the recycling. You talking about the recycling facility?
No, just the landfill. That what's not recycled.
Where does the trash go?
Yeah,
right, it goes down to Hampton.
Okay.
Landfill down there.
What about, there was also concern about communication with HOAs, especially the condominium associations. Are we communicating directly with their leadership somehow?
Not directly. We've had several of them call us, and we've had discussions with them on the phone, but we haven't. I can't say that we went out and knocked on doors or called each one of them individually. We did have the neighborhood council meeting, and that was a method to get those folks supposed to go back to their neighborhoods and spread the word. But
and that was very helpful when we were there. Right. Also reminding people not to have food waste in the cardboard that they're recycling.
Well, of course, one of the reasons why China's kind of cut back on taking our stuff was that a lot of it was contaminated. So I think this is kind of a good restart for the U.S. to get back to better methods and doing the right thing when you recycle. If you go to these MRF facilities, you see all kinds of things on the table that people are putting in the recycling, so contamination.
Hopefully it'll also increase awareness because, if you go to the store with the illusion that the product you're buying is recyclable, you're less inclined to switch to another product that is recyclable. So by now sending the clear message that your I can't believe it's not butter tub is no longer recyclable, maybe you'll pick another product that is.
I can't believe it's not butter.
Frankly, I've never tried the product, so I can't believe it's not butter's not watching and sends me a bunch of nasty letters.
I can't believe
sure it's delicious.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. City Attorney report.
Nothing today.
Okay, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? No. New business. We have 6 items of new business today to consider. The first is a consideration and approval of a budget amendment for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2019, proposed resolution 19-09. Barbara Dameron.
Good afternoon. This requests a budget amendment to appropriate a Burn Justice Assistant Grant. This is a law enforcement grant in the amount of $50,000 for training.
Questions?
No questions. I guess it's good to get money in. So.
No questions.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the resolution number 19-09 be approved, consistent with the staff's recommendation.
Second.
Ms. Bertram?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
And Chief, thanks to your team for continuing to pursue these opportunities to help fund our community's needs.
Thank you very much. Much of the credit goes to Miss Debbie Middlebrook, but thank you.
Please pass along our
Certainly will.
gratitude to her. The next item is consideration and approval of Resolution 19-10, advocating for the next segment of widening for I-64 to begin at exit 234 and work westward. Mr. Trivette.
Yes, I won't belabor the point. On Monday, we had a presentation by the HRPDC on this topic. This is a resolution that was asked for by James City County of all the regional partners in the HRPDC to help advocate for this work to begin closer to Williamsburg as opposed to closer to Richmond when the funding is available.
And so this is for the 29-mile gap
right.
between where the current segment 3 will end and where the current Bottoms Bridge extension will end.
Exactly.
But, go ahead.
Sorry, no.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's good that we're doing this, particularly because it is important to our region, and from a regional perspective, since James City County is a proponent of this and asked us to do this, I think it's good that we're helping.
So I agree on all those points. I just was wondering, localities are considering this resolution for adoption, and then is there a way that we will be notified if we, obtain this prioritization?
Oh, sure.
Be in the news.
What we're basically urging is that the state government, either at the governor's office or the Commonwealth Transportation Board that makes funding decisions like this, when they prioritize work, prioritize it in this way. I think that what's going to happen in the next steps is James City County sent out sort of a general message asking localities to consider a resolution similar to theirs. Many have already. We're, of course, going to consider ours today. But also the HRPDC itself will take this up in a regional fashion so that all of the localities that participate in that will have a chance to support it sort of in one group.
Okay.
And so I imagine what will happen is as the funding becomes committed, the HRPDC will let all of the supporting localities know that it's progressing.
And it might be too much to ask, but as Mr. Crum mentioned on Monday, it would be great if some of this funding could be provided before the mobilized assets on 64 now are retracted, because the savings could be significant.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll move that City Council approve resolution number 19-10 as drafted.
Second.
Ms. Bertram?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Our next item is consideration of a memorandum of understanding among William and Mary, James City County, York County Economic Development Authority, and the City of Williamsburg to continue the Launchpad Business Incubator Program and included among the services offered as part of William and Mary's Entrepreneurship Hub. Ms. DeWitt.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I wish I could be as brief as Ms. Dameron just was, but I'm going to
Kind of caught us off guard with her brevity.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with regional economic development generally, and then talk specifically about the action we're requesting of council today, which is approval of a specific memorandum of understanding to move the business incubator called Launchpad from Newtown into Tribe Square in the city in conjunction with the William and Mary effort. So the big picture is that we have, as you're very aware, the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance has been going through some transition around Senate Bill 942, very exciting for the area. And as that transition was going on, the Greater Williamsburg Partnership, which is an economic development effort of the 3 localities in Greater Williamsburg, had transitioned from Hampton Roads Economic Development Authority to become its own entity. And this paved the way for an alignment of the 2 groups. So the Business Council portion of the Chamber and Tourism Alliance is merging with the Greater Williamsburg Partnership. It's an exciting effort for these regional efforts to be housed together. There'll be some overhead savings and some synergies there that are very exciting. Both boards have approved the action, and the merger will become effective July 1st, 2019. The first step will be to hire a full-time staff person to run the Greater Williamsburg effort. This will be a director position under the executive director, Terry Benez, over there. The Greater Williamsburg Board, which is made up of private sector members and members of each economic development authority, will move over to the Business Council as a committee. and also has some representation who are present today, I'll introduce them in a moment, on the Business Council Board as well. So very excited that it's a great merger and going to work very well. The Greater Williamsburg Partnership had two parts. One was the traditional economic development marketing that's moving over to the Business Council. The other effort was a regional business incubator, which we started in conjunction with James City and York County. It was our first official revenue sharing agreement, and that agreement will stay with the Launchpad if this move is endorsed. And that revenue sharing agreement allows any businesses that graduate from the incubator and then locate in any of the three localities, the taxes they pay to that locality are shared amongst all three localities for the first 5 years after graduation. All taxes except real property tax, since that is the ground in the other locality, but all the other taxes, sales tax, meals, rooms, B-poll, machinery and tools, business property tax, all those are shared for 5 years. With the idea that that could subsidize some of the Launchpad expenses moving forward. So this is a merger with a new partner we're super excited about. William & Mary's always been very involved with the Launchpad, but they were going through a transition in their entrepreneurship center at the same time as these other transitions I was mentioning. So the stars aligned. And these groups, the request is to move Launchpad over to the William & Mary Entrepreneurship Center, which will be housed in Tribe Square. A portion of Tribe Square, which is the part that was Mooyah restaurant over there, will actually house the Launchpad businesses. It will be built out into business office space, while the other side, you'll see a video in a moment of what the other side, which will be the real, where the energy and the entrepreneurship hub will happen with students and businesses alike, and that the Launchpad businesses will have access to that. The highlights of the Memorandum of Understanding is that that space will be built out as an office. Each locality will continue to fund the Launchpad at $34,500 per year. We've been doing that for several years. That price is not going to change, and your Economic Development Authority handles that in its budget every year. A Launchpad Advisory Committee will be established based on the membership of the current Launchpad board. So that advisory committee will meet at least 4 times a year, give input to the Entrepreneurship Center, and help with those synergies. The Small Business Development Center and SCORE also sit on that board, as well as a Launchpad graduate from Northern Virginia. So we have a terrific group of people giving their volunteer time to this effort. The real exciting thing from a staff standpoint is that William & Mary will manage and operate the Launchpad. So right now it's been a nonprofit managing a lease, managing staff, managing support staff, and now this will, much like the move over to the Business Council, this will merge with the Entrepreneurship Hub. William & Mary will hire employees to take on all those roles and report out to us. So very exciting. Of course, the bigger excitement is that our businesses will be there with students and faculty and resources to help them with their entrepreneurship goals. Lastly, I saved the best for last. There's a one-time relocation cost to move from Newtown to, oh, I thought I had a listing of that, but to move from Newtown over to Tribe Square, and that accounts for keeping the existing lease still has some months on it, so satisfying that lease that was already signed, paying for the actual moving itself, and then paying for build-out cost. The Historic Triangle Collaborative has put some money towards this. President Rowe has put some of her strategic President's Office money towards this, and we're asking each locality to pay up to $50,000 for the rest of those expenses. I'm delighted to announce that James City County approved the MOU in the relocation cost Tuesday evening, I believe, this week. So I'd love to introduce our Launchpad chairperson, Julie Sum. She's also the William & Mary Economic Development Director. She's here today. Graham Henshaw was here earlier with her. He had to run to another meeting. He's going to try to get back. If he does, he'll say a few words. He's the staff person who's actually going to run the Entrepreneurship Center. So Julie has a short presentation that includes a video to show you what this new space at Tribe Square will look like. And then our Greater Williamsburg Partnership Chairman, Steve Mead, who's also the Vice Chairman of the York County EDA, has led us through all these transitions and given numerous volunteer hours. We thank him as well. He's here to answer questions if they arise. But Julie will come give you a short peek into the new Tribe Square.
Good afternoon, Mayor Freiling and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Graham regrets that he had to leave, but I imagine he might come running in at any moment. I am Julie Sums. I'm the Director of Economic Development and Business Innovation and the Chair of the Launchpad Board, and Graham is both a faculty member and the Executive Director of the Allen B. Miller Entrepreneurship Center. And it's been my pleasure to serve on the Launchpad Board for the last several years, and I'm pleased to be before you today because I think we're at an exciting point of regional entrepreneurship in Greater Williamsburg. First, let me thank you for your support of the Launchpad over the last few years and to get us to where we are today. It's taken quite a lot of work and leadership from the 3 economic development directors and the chief administrative officers, and your financial support has been important, but we could not have gotten this far without the expertise and contribution of Michelle and Drew as well. I can give you a few statistics on the Launchpad just to give you an idea of where we are now. We have 38 businesses that are touched by the Launchpad that have required our services that we've provided. 97% of those are still in operation. Currently, we have 16 active companies, which include both residential and virtual or community members. We've had 2 graduates, Correggio and SVT Robotics, and we're currently 100% occupied. To give you an idea of the types of businesses we've had at the Launchpad, our success rate has been 95%. 32% of our businesses are women-owned. There's 16% minority-owned and 8% military veteran. Of those 38 that we've tracked, 97% still stay within the Greater Williamsburg area. This is our future, and if Graham were here, he would be happy to talk to you about the transition of both our physical space and William & Mary's impact on entrepreneurship on campus. To give you an idea, this will be the Launchpad space. It'll be 10 offices. If you look at the top of the page, those are the doors that lead to the rest of the entrepreneurship hub, and Chick-fil-A is to the left of the diagram. It's about 2,400 square feet. There will be 10 offices, but one of the offices will be a co-working space, so those will have 2 community members or virtual tenants versus a residential tenant. So part of what makes this exciting for us, and I guess I'll show you the video first and then I'll share with you.
She said it might go to sleep.
Here will be a video that shows a rendering of the entire hub. So it's the 3 suites, the 2 that are across from Chick-fil-A and then the one behind it. So this is as you're walking in the front with the reception area, areas for pitching, areas for co-working, little nooks and crannies for you to be able to have small meetings. One of the 3 conference rooms, there's vending and kitchen. If you're up late at night and need to eat something or heat something up, there will be a copier room. There will be a makerspace area, so you can do both printing on paper and 3D printing, telephone nook. This is the other side that's across from the Launchpad space. You can see the Launchpad over there. Again, more office space. Graham Henshaw's office, the Associate Director's office will be on this wall. Lockers for students. This area will be controlled by a key, a card key that you can swipe in. So if you're a Launchpad tenant, you have access to any and all of these resources. Plus,
hey guys, Jared Wesley here of Live.
Elephants there?
Yeah.
We can have elephants?
I had that moment of what's going to show up. Yeah, there you go.
So as you saw, the renderings
are going through hundreds of hours of audio and video and this, and don't get me wrong, anytime you scan for stocks and you learn things on the internet, that's a good thing, but too many of you have overcomplicated your trading, okay? You have spaghetti on your charts, you have a million different oscillators, all kinds of indicators, comm channel index.
What's exciting about this from the William Mary perspective is that we've been working a number of years with the Allen B. Miller Center and other resources on campus to create the people, the program, and the place for students to really excel at entrepreneurship. And Graham is walking in, so I will let him speak to that, actually. And may I approach y'all?
Just-in-time presentations, thank you. Sorry for my delay. Were you able to show the video?
Yes.
Okay. The handout that you've just received is actually the end-of-year report that we sent out about the Allen B. Miller Entrepreneurship Center. And really, there's only three things that I want to share as it relates to this great opportunity. And that is that this Tribe Square initiative initially was thought of as a William and Mary entrepreneurship hub. And that was very exciting to us because we've been working hard to develop entrepreneurial thinking as a capacity for all William and Mary students. And we've been doing an okay job at that and have this opportunity to scale those efforts by moving to Tribe Square. And what we're now able to be thinking about is that this is a regional opportunity, that this is to be a regional hub for entrepreneurship, not just a William and Mary hub. And so that excites me a great deal. I saw the business that was recognized here, and so we can imagine being a part of that ecosystem that develops businesses that one day get recognized at city council meetings. So that's the first thing, is that this is now a regional, can be viewed of as a regional opportunity, not just a William and Mary opportunity. The other thing I wanted to share is that for any organizations that support entrepreneurial initiatives, there's really three ingredients that are necessary. You need people that are dedicated to equipping and cultivating these entrepreneurial thinkers. We have that through the organization that we've set up. The Miller Center has a mentor network, a strong mentor network. We have staff that are committed to developing these skills and abilities in our students and our constituents, actually. You need programming. So you need programming that provides people opportunities to network, to meet each other, to grow their ventures. We have that as well. And you need place. You need an environment which can be, for many, their home, the place that they are growing these ventures. So people, programs, and place, we have all those things. And the opportunity that's in front of us is about making those same resources available to Launchpad clients, to residents in our community who are trying to start entrepreneurial ventures. This initiative, this opportunity is about blurring the lines between William and Mary students who have been our primary audience, and now Launchpad and anyone who gets into that program now has access to the world-class resources that William and Mary can bring to bear. So those were the primary points that I wanted to make, and then address any questions that there might be. But we're really excited about this collaborative opportunity to participate in the regional entrepreneurial hub.
I don't have any questions, but I sat here and listened, thinking of kind of the unintended consequence of Senate Bill 942 and creating the Tourism Council, Business Council, and the ability to bring the GWP in with the Business Council, I think is a great opportunity that no one foresaw at the time. And now that we can bring Launchpad into the city, across the street from the college and next to the Greater Williamsburg Chamber of Tourism Alliance, in a way just to breed success. I really think this is an opportunity that will help all of us flourish in a way that we weren't able to do with all these different organizations, kind of in their own pods, silos, if you will. So bringing you all together, all of us together in this unique way, I think is going to be very successful. That's my hope. Thank you for the efforts.
I don't have any particular comments, but I had three things I wanted to highlight. The first with GWP and the Business Council, like you've largely said, serving as the rep, having those entailing discussions on the executive committee and also with the larger board. Julie is familiar with those discussions. I think we've been largely enthusiastic about the merger with those two great organizations. And, SB 942, again, has had a lot of shift and transformation, and I think I could say confidently that this is one of those really positive transformations as well. But with the two others, I was a student when Muya was still there in the space, and when it left, one of the issues that we had discussed was how do we find ways to fill up those unused spaces. Now, I didn't envision Launchpad coming in, but I'm really glad that they are. And I think this is a great way to fill in some space to be able, like you've highlighted, to really attract students and also other folks who may have entrepreneurial ideas. I've also think, in terms of the third point, there's been some students who've approached us about some business ideas, and largely it's not been guided through mentorship or sometimes they may be business informed, but largely from my experience, they have not come from the business school. And I think they've never thought to approach the business school because they didn't think that they were entitled to because they weren't business students. Maybe I'm different. But now this is different. Now they can go across the street on campus and enter into a space where you can see a whole confluence of William & Mary students and also maybe outside entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
So that's really exciting.
And I think it's a win-win.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. It's a win-win. So looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Well, if you hadn't gotten back in time, I was going to say that we had this discussion last week, and that you were so excited about the opportunities and the prospects. So I'm glad you returned to share your enthusiasm, and I too think that it's going to be a great space. And I think the broadening that you're already doing as far as opening the Entrepreneurship Center to other than business students has been good, and this will just expand it. And it also goes, I think, hand in hand with the EDA plan that was presented to us recently about the target industries. And I said, I'll get you a copy of that, but between Michelle and I, we will. So you'll have it aware.
Great.
Thank you.
A couple questions. I think the Tribe's Square Vibrancy is really great. And will that help normalize the operating hours for Chick-fil-A?
I'm not sure if it'll affect the operating hours of Chick-fil-A. Certainly, the entrepreneurial thinkers who are in Tribe Square will be fueled by Chick-fil-A, and if they're smart business owners, they will want to stay open a little bit longer because there's going to be people there. As we've described, this is going to create a vibrancy in that space that hasn't been there for a while.
Right. What about other operations at the college that might have synergies, like the placemaking spaces? How does that all relate?
It relates in a really meaningful way. So the Tribe Square initiative is William & Mary coming together to do this. So it is the Entrepreneurship Center, but it is the maker spaces across campus. So our Vice Provost, Dennis Manos, is right here with us with this initiative, and so he oversees the maker spaces and the other aspects of research and technology that are going to be really beneficial not only to our students who are there, but again to the Launchpad clients who are there as well. As I mentioned, this provides access to those world-class resources, and so there's already collaborative efforts underway on the William and Mary front, and they're going to be made available to all who participate in that hub. So you have the maker spaces. There's even going to be in the hub that you saw the video of, there will be a small maker space there. So 3D printers, laser cutters, things like that. Turns out that there is a benefit to renovating what was a commercial restaurant. There's a ventilation system that works really well for prototyping facilities. So we're just going to use that for the makerspace.
My final question is, once you stand everything up, is there an opportunity to maybe have demonstrations or receptions for maybe some of the high school students, bring them in, and especially the ones that are looking for career options and sort of open their horizons?
That's a wonderful idea. And I think the new location actually supports that quite nicely. I like that.
Thank you.
So I echo comments from my colleagues. Very much appreciate everybody's participation in this project, from the GWP to the Business Council to all the economic development authorities, but also especially to the college. I don't think we can overstate how important it is that William and Mary is not only a willing participant, but they're an enthusiastic, embracing, driving participant. And if we didn't have their cooperation and their guidance, this wouldn't be a fraction of what it can be now. So if Ms. Sums, Mr. Henshaw, if you could pass along to President Rowe, I don't know everybody who's involved, Sam Jones, Henry Broadus, Sean Hughes, Dennis Manos, everybody, how just grateful we are for this opportunity and how we fully plan to make the most of it. We talk about downtown vibrancy. This is going to be a key element of downtown vibrancy. Michelle, I know that you used to talk a great deal about the creative class, and that's exactly the type of people who will be involved in this program, both as students and as people in the real world, trying to find their way as new entrepreneurs and business owners. So as we look at that goal of retaining some of that incredible talent that graduates and leaves Williamsburg every year, this is one more element that hopefully gets them to consider staying. Additionally, helps us recruit other talent from outside of the area, which in turn, when you bring all those entrepreneurs and potential workers together, helps us recruit other businesses. So this has long-range potential that could be tremendous, will be tremendous, and as much as we've enjoyed being part of the Newtown community, I think we're particularly thrilled to have everybody downtown and a part of the William and Mary community in the city of Williamsburg. So if you could just share our appreciation with your colleagues, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the Memorandum of Understanding to continue the Launchpad Business Incubator Program as part of William and Mary's Entrepreneurship Hub, and request that the EDA pay up to $50,000 for one-time relocation expenses of the Launchpad, subject to the concurrent approval by William and Mary, James City County, and York County.
Second.
I believe Mr. Pond's got the second in there first. Ms. Burcham, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Thank you. This takes us to our next agenda item, which is the, find where I was. Consideration and approval of proposed ordinance 19-12 to amend and restate section 2-117 of Article 3, Chapter 2 regarding term limits of members of the Williamsburg Area Arts Commissions. Ms. Shelton, is this?
The Arts Commission is a council creation, and so council has some flexibility with respect to setting the terms for members on the commission. Council asked us to look at this. The ordinance provides that instead of 2 complete terms, members may serve 3 complete terms, and it shortens the lapse between those consecutive terms or possible terms from 2 years until 1 year.
Questions for Ms. Shelton?
Just to remind me, Planning Commission has a term limit of 2, but they're 4-year terms, correct?
And it's set by state code.
State code. And how about ARB, is that?
Also set by state code.
Okay. But again, that's a 4-year term?
Yes, this is a council-created body, so council can set the terms.
Questions? I would just say that one reason I think this is valuable is because from the outside, the Arts Commission, well, from any side, the Arts Commission looks great. I mean, they do wonderful work. We very much appreciate the efforts that they undertake, but I think from the outside, it's hard to understand exactly how much effort goes into what they do, and it is considerable. So if we have people who are willing to stick with us and do that a little bit longer, and we can benefit from their experience, I think this is a real benefit to the community.
I think only being able to serve 4 years, I don't think is long enough. And using the example of planning commission ARB, by the time you get your wheels under you and learn how to participate in the group, you get run off. So extending it and making it easier to come back, I think, is a positive factor.
Do I hear your motion?
I move that City Council reappoint all current board and commission members who are eligible and willing.
Ms. Ramsey, that's the wrong motion.
Oh.
Would you like?
The motion should be to approve ordinance number 19-12.
June 13, so.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 19-12.
I think it's 11.
11? It's around 12 on the memo.
It's 12 in the ordinance. It's 11 in the packet, so it should be 12.
Okay. So
second motion.
So Mr. Zhang's motion was correct. Mr. Pons has seconded that. Ms. Burcham, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Motion passes. This takes us to our next item, consideration and approval of the 5th amended Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Williamsburg and the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority. Mr. Trivette.
Yes, so, I frequently say that we're still navigating the infancy of the merger between the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority and the City of Williamsburg. And as we do that, we will continue to make changes to make the system work the best that it can. And this is just one more example of that. The 5th amended MOU only makes one very simple change, and that is to make the executive director once again an employee of the city.
Questions for Mr. Trivette? Comments? Motion.
I move that the City Council approve the 5th amended Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Williamsburg and the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority as drafted and recommended by staff.
Second.
Ms. Burcham.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
This takes us to our last item of new business, which is, Ms. Ramsey's chomping at the bit on this one, appointments to boards and commissions. Mr. Trivette.
It's, as you know, we go through an exhaustive process of filling these vacancies twice a year, and lately it seems like we're constantly talking about vacancies on boards and commissions. But Ms. Burcham has done an outstanding job of organizing a list for you today. Hopefully that you can approve all of the reappointments as we continue to work on at least one outstanding vacancy even after today's action.
Questions or comments?
Ready? Yes. So I move that City Council reappoint all current board and commission members who are eligible and willing consistent with the June 2019 expirations, and the council appoint Bob Leake to the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission, Sandra Linthal and Wendy Evans to the Social Services Advisory Board, and Wendy Evans to the Colonial Behavioral Health Board, the Colonial Group Home Commission, and the Old Town Medical Center Board.
Second.
Ms. Burcham.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Motion passes. This takes us to our next item, which is open forum. I believe I have one speaker's card. Mr. Charles Glazner. Welcome, Mr. Glazner.
I'm Charlie Glazner, and I live at 319 South Boundary Street. I spoke at the council's working session several days ago regarding the landlord's liability for a tenant not having paid their water bill. I guess if that's something we can talk about, fine. Otherwise, I'll wait until you let me know when you want to talk about it.
Yes, as I believe we discussed at the Monday meeting, Mr. Trivette's going to poll council, and we will come back to you by next month.
So when should I come back?
I think Mr. Trivette will be in touch with you directly. Yes.
Thank you very
correct,
much.
sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Glazer. Mr. Shelley? Welcome, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you very much. I am Gary Shelley. I live at 205 Indian Springs Road. I've been speaking with regularity in open forum the past few months. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I've had to participate in these meetings. Though I intend to be less of a presence, I will continue to accept my responsibility as a citizen to keep a watchful eye on our elected officials and our staff and to seek accountability if necessary. My involvement in civic affairs has given me a greater respect for our system of governance and for the people such as yourselves who dedicate your lives to making it work. My mission has been to promote awareness of the importance and the scope of contributions that college students bring to our community. I understand that there will be issues and sometimes conflict. I also understand the City Council is charged with the difficult task of creating policy that best benefits all the citizens of Williamsburg, of which students comprise a significant portion. Council must not favor an entitled few. I have brought to your attention some specific issues that have challenged council in the past few years. There were many from which I could have chosen. I fervently hope that this council will find a way to make Williamsburg a more inclusive city and reject the divisive vision of past leadership regarding college students in our neighborhoods. At last month's work session, I said that I had a difficult matter to speak about. It brought me no pleasure. But today, I will with great pleasure mention 6 of the many students I've been privileged to know over the years. Some I knew better than others, and it's fun to keep up with them. I should alert you that I will shamelessly be dropping some names. I should mention that I would not have known 3 of them had they not been allowed to live in a grandfathered duplex. Walter Hickey was a Flathead reporter who I'd lost track of. While channel surfing a couple of years ago, I saw Walter being interviewed. I think it was on CNN. Walter works for Nate Silver and 538. Max Fisher was a very talented Flathead reporter who wrote passionately about town gun relations. After graduating from William & Mary, Max wrote for the Atlantic magazine, later moving on to the Washington Post. He currently writes for the New York Times. Patton Oswalt. At William & Mary, he was the Flathead cartoonist. Patton has had an amazing career with many, many credits, including the voice of Remy in the movie Ratatouille, the role of Spencer Olchin in the TV sitcom The King of Queens, and a movie role opposite Charlize Theron. He is also a best-selling author and a stand-up comedian. He has made many guest appearances on Conan O'Brien, Seinfeld, and even SpongeBob SquarePants. Mayor, you might know the next student. Like you, he is a runner. Like you, he's very fast. I got to know John Pence when he was on the William & Mary cross country and track team. I watched John win the Colonial Relays 10K in a time of 30 minutes and 8 seconds. I lost track of John until reading the style section of the Washington Post last September and seeing his picture alongside his fiancée, a cousin of Kellyanne Conway. John Pence currently works for his uncle Mike, who's Vice President of the United States. Dave Brown. I got to know Dave very well. The most accomplished person I ever knew, and the most humble. A true American hero. I was honored when his family invited me to attend Dave's induction into the Virginia Aviation Hall of Fame. And lastly, the irrepressible Luther Lowe. You no doubt remember him. Luther was one of the students who sought to run for city council in 2004. To no one's surprise, Luther has had an extraordinary life. After leaving Williamsburg, Luther took a job with Wesley Clark during the period that General Clark was seeking the Democratic presidential nomination. Luther is currently a vice president for Yelp. He married fellow 2005 William & Mary classmate, Weijia Zhang. The officiant at their wedding was Jim Obergefell of the landmark Supreme Court civil rights case. Weijia is CBS TV White House correspondent. You may have seen her last September when she refused President Trump's order for her to sit after he interrupted her question to him. William & Mary students, another great reason to live in Williamsburg. Who wouldn't be proud to have students such as these as neighbors? We need to prove to William & Mary students that they are welcomed and cherished. You must get this right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Would anybody else like to address council this afternoon? This evening? Seeing no one, I'll close the open forum.
No, I think, question about Susan, I
I
think
think
because
I can
we went to add a third term, she simply stays on.
Right, what the motion, just to clarify, there was some concern that she
Group
hadn't been
motion
appointed, but what happened was when we extended the term, she became a reappointment, and the motion was to make all eligible and willing reappointments.
Right.
Thank you. We have no closed session?
No closed session, sir.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Council.